Only after death did I realize I had been the aging first wife in a story about a secret mistress. The female lead, Reborn, was originally the illegitimate daughter of a 7th-rank capital official. She met Prime Minister Jiang Xuanqi at a poetry gathering and pledged their love in a Buddhist temple. Despite their age difference of several decades, they still considered each other destined true love. She threw herself into the affair passionately. Becoming a secret mistress hidden from the light, literati praised her as the legendary Hongfu woman of our dynasty. Even my own children adored her as their father did, until she became pregnant and refused to let the child be born nameless, so she fled with a farewell letter. Yet before she could leave the capital's outskirts, Jiang Xuanqi led troops to capture her back to the ministerial residence, where I repeatedly tried to harm her, bringing her near death several times. I met my own violent end, while she was elevated to the rightful wife the very next day, rising from a lowly concubine's daughter to become the Prime Minister's wife. On the night of my rebirth, I submitted a memorial to the Emperor, accusing Prime Minister Wen of the crime of privately deploying troops. They all seemed to have forgotten that 30 years ago, I was the female general commanding the 3 armies, and to this day, I still receive military pay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now, the story begins. When Jiang Xuanqi brought his pregnant mistress through the door, Nanny Ju was holding a written contract in her hands. This old servant dares to ask the young master today, does the vow written in black and white still hold true? Her daughter Wanqing calmly touched up the tail of my eyebrow for me. Only now, those once gentle distant hill brows had developed blade-like peaks, transforming into a pair of sharp-sword brows. My lady, will you be needing weapons later? This servant oils your spiked club daily. Though it hasn't been used in years, it will handle exactly as it did in its prime. Seeing how both of them grew increasingly indignant, I found myself caught between laughter and tears. The gloom in my heart vanished completely after rebirth. Gazing at the gaunt face reflected in the mercury mirror, not a trace of aging showed despite the passage of years. Years of pampered living had instead bestowed a maidenly fairness and delicacy, with skin still smooth and firm. Even my hair remained lustrously jet black. Who could have guessed, upon first meeting me, that today I'd be celebrating my 50th birthday? Yet in my previous life, when I died merely 5 years from now, I'd already been tormented into white-haired decrepitude. Those 5 years aged me rapidly, leaving me with a strange, irritable temper, wherever I appeared in the manor. Mirrors were strictly forbidden. I even replaced all my attendants with plain-faced, homely middle-aged women. At the sight of those flower-like girls, I would inexplicably fly into a rage, even erupting in fury. I even drove Wanqing away, but she refused to leave. She would rather disfigure her own face than stop serving by my side. How could I abandon my mistress in her hour of need, without our mother and daughter to protect her? Wouldn't she be devoured alive by this den of wolves? I've come to loathe and recoil from my own reflection, yet sometimes late at night, I wonder, how did I become like this? It wasn't until after death that I realized, I was merely the aging first wife in a story about an illegitimate concubine. My existence was Jiang Xuanqi's only blemish. My death simply cleared the main chamber for the female lead. I refused to accept it. Wei Fengming could have died peacefully in bed, or perished from illness or war, but never should have met such an ignoble sudden death. In my past life at this time, I would have flown into a rage before Mother Ju or Wanqing could even get angry. Looking back now, it seems we master and servants shared the same temperament. Holding Jiang Xuanqi's written vow of marriage proposal, I publicly confronted him before all the guests. My unrestrained outpouring of grievances wasn't entirely because Jiang Xuanqi had broken his vow and taken a concubine. I was even more infuriated that they chose to put me on the spot during my 50th birthday celebration, forcing me to drink the concubine tea of the female lead, Reborn. What chilled my heart further was that Jiang Xuanqi actually used his schemes and calculations against me, showing no regard whatsoever for my birthday. He chose the moment when all the guests had gathered to pressure me into giving his mistress official recognition. I refused to give him what he wanted. In the end, Reborn fled in shame and anger, while Jiang Xuanqi stormed off with a face as dark as thunder. What was meant to be a joyous birthday banquet ended in discord. After witnessing such a scandalous farce, who could remain seated with an appetite? Before all dishes were served, most guests had already departed, leaving behind absurd chaos and carrying away the boiling stench of disgrace throughout the capital. All whisper of my jealousy, a 50-year-old fool shamelessly vying for favor against a concubine young enough to be my daughter, utterly disregarding my lord's dignity. Even my own children scorn me for lacking propriety in old age, ashamed to be associated with such humiliation. Jiang Xuanxi's political rivals submitted memorials impeaching him, accusing him of lax household discipline, using this to question his competence and attack his moral character. It was only then that I learned Jiang Xuanxi's affair, keeping a mistress outside, was an open secret, with everyone knowingly keeping it hidden from me, the principal wife. Throughout the residence, she had long been addressed as concubine or second madam. The emperor issued an edict reprimanding him and specifically bestowed upon me a pot of vinegar, while the empress sent matrons to instruct me in feminine virtues and wifely duties. Even my deceased father bore the blame for failing to discipline his daughter properly. For a long time afterward, noble women in the capital used me as a cautionary tale, and it became fashionable for them to actively seek concubines for their husbands as proof of their virtue. It was from this moment that I seemed to become a different person, standing against the entire world's conventions. I engaged in clumsy domestic schemes, crude plots, and displayed undisguised jealousy and malice, only to suffer repeated setbacks and humiliations, ultimately dying from pent-up frustration. My funeral hall stood deserted, the white mourning banners still hanging, while red candles already burned brightly in the neighboring courtyard. My own children played with Ruan Xintang's daughter, born only after she'd borne him several sons, offering congratulations on their father's new marriage. As these thoughts swirled, my youngest daughter Jiang Rui came bursting energetically through the door. "Oh dear mother, why are you still dressing up? What's there to fuss about? You're keeping the guests waiting. Today's visitors are all noble ladies from the capital, who could bear the responsibility if we slight any of them." She caught sight of the contract in Nanny Ju's hands and actually reached out to snatch it. Had Nanny Ju not been quick-eyed and swift-handed, that contract would have been accidentally torn to pieces on the spot. Jiang Rui, on the contrary, was displeased, carrying an air of demanding an explanation. "Why dig up these old grievances? Now that we're 50 years old, isn't it embarrassing to revisit such things?" With an indifferent expression, I instructed Wanqing to soften her overly sharp eyebrows. "Oh, your father is nearly 52. Doesn't it embarrass you that he keeps a mistress and makes their saccharine affair the talk of the town? You're making such a fuss just because I'm looking at my husband's written promises." Jiang Rui froze completely where she stood. "You know everything." I rose to my feet, standing a full half-head taller than Jiang Rui. Even with her spoiled and domineering nature towards me, she couldn't help but be overwhelmed by my imposing presence. "Do you know what? That your father is bringing his mistress here today to force me to acknowledge her status and welcome her into our home? Or do you know that you're in cahoots with him? Coming to me just so I'd walk in on them and help legitimize their illicit affair? They were the ones provoking me on my birthday, but if I lost my temper first, I'd be at a disadvantage. That way, they could manipulate me." Some scolding from the east, some coaxing from the west, using both pressure and persuasion to make me swallow this bitter pill. They thought of everything, but never anticipated my unyielding resolve. I'd rather turn the world upside down than let them have their way. Jiang Rui, her intentions exposed, flushed with anger. "Since mother already knows, why must you press so harshly? Keeping silent all this time, was it just to watch us exhaust ourselves in vain preparations for your amusement? Do you know how long we've lived in dread over something you could have resolved with a single word?" I raised my hand and slapped her across the face. "Outrageous! Who gave you permission to question your elders?" Jiang Rui had grown up and was now married. Yet this was the first time I'd ever struck her. I feel guilty that in my youth I was often away on campaigns. No matter how decisive I was on the battlefield, I would always transform into a genuinely doting mother upon returning home. Even when I occasionally lost my temper, it was usually more bark than bite. Jiang Rui had never seen me like this before. Tears gushed forth as she clutched her slapped cheek, her eyes burning with resentment. No wonder father kept Ruan Yinyang hidden away outside. even going through such pains just to give her proper status. Only now do I understand why father hasn't had any other women all these years. Outsiders may call us an immortal couple, but they don't know it's actually your jealousy that's too strong. You wouldn't even let father take a concubine. Couldn't bear to hear of it, knowing the truth. You still vent your anger on your innocent daughter. What kind of logic is that? I pinched her chin with extraordinary force, making it impossible for her to break free, forcing her to meet my gaze. Your father hid his affairs outside because he's a hypocrite. He wants to have his cake and eat it too, unwilling to part with his beautiful wife, yet reluctant to break his original vow. So he painstakingly schemes, shifting the blame onto me, using this to scale the mountain of morality, covering up his past boasts while preserving his long-cultivated reputation and dignity. Yet now he transforms into the pitiable man you describe, suppressed for years by his jealous wife. As for you, are you truly innocent? Did you ever consider what might become of me, pushed into the line of fire, if I took one wrong step, while you helped another woman scheme against your own mother just to please father? Jiang Rui was like spring bamboo, too tender to think so far ahead. Her father, seasoned by years navigating treacherous political waters, couldn't possibly have failed to foresee the worst possible outcome, yet he allowed it anyway. Perhaps everything in her past life hadn't been coincidence at all, but rather meticulously planned during this very period, even having experienced life and death once before. Thinking of this still sends a chill through my heart. Jiang Rui lowered her eyes, refusing to look at me. Ruia, you've gone to such pains to pave the way for Wan Xintang. Did you spare even a single thought for my birthday? Her entire body trembled with guilt until she could no longer stand, collapsing weakly to the ground. I know, not at all. I lifted my foot to leave, but she grabbed the hem of my skirt. Mother, please don't make things difficult for Aunt Wan anymore. Her voice was bitter. This is better for everyone. You can't possibly expect a man to stay faithful to his old wife his whole life. Can you? I said coldly. Originally, I intended to take the contract and expose your father's hypocrisy before everyone, turning everything upside down. The hem of my robe was suddenly tugged tight. With a flick of my sleeve, I shook her off. But today is my birthday, a time meant for joyous gatherings with family and friends. I couldn't bear to have everyone arrive in high spirits only to leave disappointed, so I've abandoned that idea. But that doesn't mean I'll let them off the hook. Jiang Xuanqi may be an old fox, but I was once a renowned hunter beyond the Great Wall, and hunting foxes was my specialty. I instructed Nurse Ju to carefully store that deed, straightened my clothes, and as I stepped out the door, Jiang Rui called out loudly, "Mother." When I paused, her voice softened. "Happy birthday, your daughter congratulates you." I lifted my foot and walked away. Thank you, but no need. Today, someone must have come specifically to celebrate my birthday, in my previous life. Before that loving couple could even enter the hall, I intercepted them halfway. For 50 years of my life, I've never engaged in scheming and plotting, nor do I know how to handle such situations. All I understand is the way of war, that he who strikes first gains the advantage. Yet I didn't realize that all the guests saw was my aggressive demeanor of taking the initiative to attack. Unaware of the inside story and ignorant of the truth, people naturally sympathize with the weak. Seeing this domineering, openly furious matriarch, even if they knew the whole story, they'd first lose 3 parts of their empathy. In this life, I sit solemnly in the grand hall, surrounded by endless birthday wishes ringing in my ears, every face before me wearing a smile. While congratulatory gifts flow in like a steady stream, the uncles standing shoulder to shoulder with father remain hale and hearty, calling me lass, while the younger generations with their newborn children come before me to introduce themselves. Had no one disturbed this peace, today would have been one of my most joyous days, until Jiang Rui brought Wan Xintang before me, their eyes filled with a mix of pleading and supplication. "Mother, this is..." She seemed at a loss for how to introduce Wan Xintang's identity, stammering before falling silent. After all was said and done, she ultimately chose to stand by her father's side. As for Wan Xintang, he straightened his posture and bowed to me with neither humility nor arrogance. "This humble girl is Wan Xintang, daughter of Wan Shozhuan from the Hanlin Academy. Greetings to Madam Jiang. May your birthday be blessed with health and your springtime radiance endure forever." the daughter-in-law of my uncle's household, about my age, had just mentioned her family's child passing the imperial examinations. Being naturally straightforward and coming from a well-established family, she turned to size up Wan Xintang upon hearing this. "Well now, so you're the daughter of that newly promoted Shozhuan." Wan Xintang felt both secretly pleased and curious. "Has this noble lady heard of my late father?" The noblewoman let out a cold laugh. "His reputation precedes him indeed. My son is the newly appointed Chuanlu scholar, who served alongside Minister Wan as editors, since taking office. He's practically moved his entire household to the Hanlin Academy. Recently, when the top scholar was promoted to provincial service, my son received the highest evaluation among the 4 editors. His superiors intend to report to His Majesty for his further advancement. Who would have thought this memorial would be returned alongside your father's promotion decree? Might I ask, young lady, what exceptional merits your father possesses, or what celestial path he might have taken? It might also help enlighten my child, lest he remains depressed at home all day." Before Jiang Xuanxi's figure could be seen, her voice was already heard. "Madam, what sort of talk is this? After all, Minister Wan has seniority and it's about time for his promotion. It's good for young people to gain more experience. Accumulating steadily leads to lasting success." The noble lady also hailed from a military family and wasn't intimidated by the civil minister. With a chuckle, "True. They say examinees come and go like flowing water, but Editor Wan remains an iron fixture. Every year, the second-tier graduates hope Editor Wan would retire to make room for newcomers. Who would have thought Editor Wan would bloom late in life and even get promoted? It's just my son's bad luck to pass the exams right when his daughter came of age." The words pierced Wan Xintang's cheeks crimson, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. A dangerous glint flashed in Jiang Xuanxi's eyes. But I cut him off before he could speak. "Enough. She's merely Rui's close friend from the inner chambers. Now that you've met her, you may withdraw." Wan Xintang gazed at Jiang Xuanxi with tear-filled eyes, her hands protectively cradling her abdomen as her expression twisted in distress. Her skin was fair as snow, her beauty delicate and fragile. Jiang Xuanxi cleared his throat. "Madam, this Wan girl is cultured and virtuous, beautiful without yet wise within, though born of a concubine. She still comes from a respectable scholarly family. Why not bring her into our household as an honored concubine? What does Madam think of this proposal?" The young ones had only heard how Prime Minister Wen sought to marry the general's fierce daughter, and how for all these years his chambers remained empty, save for me alone. All proclaimed us a match made in heaven, but those of elder years had mostly witnessed with their own eyes that grand wedding ceremony over 2 decades past. To coax me from my bridal chamber, Jiang Xuanxi had servants bring a low table, then swept aside his robes to kneel on one knee beneath the heavens, with one hand swearing solemn oaths and the other writing swiftly like a soaring dragon. He loudly proclaimed, "From this day forth, our hearts shall know each other eternally without betrayal. In years to come, may he who breaks this vow be severed from officialdom." I had originally been cornered in my room by a group of close girlfriends who wouldn't let me leave, but upon hearing these words, I grew instantly frantic. Jiang Xuanxi came from humble beginnings as a common scholar, having risen through the imperial examinations with the emperor's current favor. How could he lightly stake his official career on such an oath? Unable to exit through the door, I kicked open the window instead and climbed out, yet she fell right into the bridegroom's embrace. A peerless youth, bearing the noble stance of pine and cypress, his laughter flowed freely like spring breeze and bright sunshine as he pressed the marriage contract into my palm. Words poured cannot be retrieved, spoken with utmost sincerity. Should there come a day in distant years when elder sister Feng wishes, she need only fling this paper in my face. Even if I've ascended to ministerial rank, I shall resign my post immediately. And thus did he carry off both my person and my heart to his home. Before death I still clung to these empty words, only wanting to ask Jiang Xuanxi of that time, "Clearly I did exactly as you said, why didn't you keep your promise?" The young man merely felt regret. Yet it was only regret, nothing out of the ordinary. Most of the older generation sighed ruefully. Young lovers in the end still couldn't withstand the allure of fresh beauty. All eyes were instantly fixed upon me. Wan Xintang gazed at Jiang Xuanxi with deep emotion as he stood tall and straight, shielding her from wind and rain. Like a master strategist, he seemed to have cast an inescapable net. No matter what choice I made, I would become a trapped beast. They say one marries a wife for virtue and takes concubines for beauty. Since my husband has already made his choice, I naturally have no reason to object, seeing that things had indeed unfolded as he predicted, and with the best possible outcome. Even Jiang Xuanqi couldn't help but show a hint of smugness. Wan Xintang was as delighted as an innocent maiden. I always knew Madam would be wonderfully easy to get along with. He simply wouldn't believe me, going around in such unnecessary circles. I smiled faintly, since affection blossomed so early. You should have told me sooner, that way I could have sent a proper matchmaker to your noble household, to arrange the betrothal for my son. The person before me stiffened. Madam, you said arranging the betrothal for whom? Holding her hand, I smiled at the gathered guests. Look at this child, has happiness made her foolish? I have only Jiang Rui as my son. Who else could you possibly wish to marry? My son has been shy since birth, not close to me at all, even for trivial matters like taking a concubine. He actually begs his father to speak up. He lacks proper manners. How could I possibly let you enter the Prime Minister's residence without proper matchmaking or betrothal gifts? Rest assured, although it's merely taking a concubine, the Prime Minister's residence will not skimp on any of the customary wedding formalities. We'll make sure you enter in grand style. Since you're keeping secrets from me, then I'll just pretend I know nothing at all. In my past life, Jiang Xuanqi schemed to make me the fool. Today I'll turn the entire Jiang family into a laughingstock. Jiang Rui had always been the epitome of a silent gentleman, but now that the fire had reached his doorstep, he couldn't maintain his composure, his eyes widening in shock. Mother, you mustn't. Aunt Wan is father's mistress, our family's second madam. How can you play matchmaker so recklessly? The open secret was thus laid bare by him. His bluntness took me by surprise as well. But I distinctly heard you've shown Miss Wan countless kindnesses. Even your sister holds her in special regard, often accompanying her to rouge shops. Even this very hair ornament she wears today was once your sister's. I personally ordered it from Baohejai. Everyone was utterly bewildered. Although Jiang Xuanqi keeping a mistress was an open secret, it had only ever been hearsay, yet it was truly rare to see Jiang's son and daughter being so close to Wan Xintang. Seizing the moment, the noblewoman who had spoken earlier twisted the knife deeper. I wondered why Minister Wen, a high-ranking official of the fourth rank, who ordinarily had little to do with the Hanlin Academy, suddenly went one day to discuss classics with the reader-in-waiting, only to give compiler Wan a hard time, leaving him to face severe reprimands after Wen departed. When my son came back and told me about it, he was even indignant on compiler Wan's behalf. But now it seems my son worried for nothing. That's exactly how it was written in the original book. Whenever Wan Xintang was mistreated at home, compiler Wan would be scolded by his superior the very next day. Whenever she faced difficulties outside, her legitimate sister would immediately be punished by the Marquis's wife. The Chancellor's carriage was conspicuous. After her meetings with Jiang Xuanqi, it was often Jiang Rui who escorted her home. Even editor Wan believed his daughter was involved with Jiang Rui, so much so that when he later discovered it was actually Jiang Xuanqi, he nearly fell out of his chair in shock. The two fools I raised became mere pawns between that shameless pair. How could this not be considered what they call a satisfying twist? After all, what Jiang Xuanqi did for Wan Xintang were all secretive high-class indulgences. Most people only heard rumors, and those who witnessed it wouldn't step forward now to clear their names. Now, with detailed accounts and eyewitnesses surfacing, it truly makes one wonder who the real protagonist of those rumors was. Even Jiang Xuanqi's expression turned somewhat peculiar. In noble households, are scandals ever in short supply? The discussions among the crowd were not hushed. Didn't the storyteller at the tea-house mention Chancellor Wen? If it were Lord Jiang, wouldn't they just carry her straight into the household? Why degrade her by making her a kept woman? Who knows, even the rumors reaching Madam's ears were about her own son. Maybe the storyteller was just spinning wild tales for novelty's sake after all. No names were mentioned. The storyteller even called her the Red Duster Maiden of our dynasty. Weren't the three heroes of the Wind and Dust a trio? Doesn't that line up? One particularly blunt person sneered coldly. Isn't this just father and son sharing the same woman? What's so strange about that? We've seen all sorts of dirty, rotten things. Jiang Xuanqi seemed to suddenly realize that Jiang Rui, who had always kept his distance from women in their past interactions, was unusually attentive and considerate toward this unofficial concubine, more so than he ever was toward his proper wife. After all, the age gap between him and Ruan Xintang was undeniably there. Once the seed of suspicion is planted, it takes root and sprouts in the heart. I opened my eyes and spoke nonsense. Look, who among those present doesn't think you two are a perfect match? Since no one objects, why keep refusing? I shifted my tone. Introducing her to me on my birthday adds to the festive atmosphere. It's only proper. If it were your father, would he ever spoil such an occasion for me? Let me make this clear, men of the Wei family dare to act and take responsibility. If you provoke her and then refuse to be accountable, don't blame me for disregarding our mother-son bond. Jiang Rui realized he had spoken wrongly and dared not say more, waiting instead for his father's cue. Yet the other man remained silent throughout. Seeing this accusation about to be forced upon him, he steeled his heart and clarified himself outright. My relationship with Miss Ruan is utterly innocent, as heaven and earth can testify. As for other matters, I truly know nothing, mother. Please don't play matchmaker recklessly and ruin the chances of true lovers. The crowd turned to look at Jiang Xuanqi. Just as Ruan Xintang's beautiful eyes caught sight of him, his gaze was scrutinizing, flickering incessantly. She was clever enough to understand at a glance why the other party refused to speak. Her heart felt as if it were being sliced apart, yet her delicate figure knelt down pitifully. It was I who admired the Prime Minister and forced myself upon him. Please do not trouble Lord Jiang anymore. I was foolish to think my humble willow-like self could lean against a towering pine. It would be better for me to leave now, shave my head, and become a nun. At least that way I could preserve my purity. With this single kneel, she seemed determined to shoulder all the blame herself. Both men felt a tremor in their hearts. Jiang Xuanqi, under astonished gazes, stepped forward to help her up. Your constitution is weak, don't kneel so easily. He firmly grasped her soft little hand, declaring it to the world. Madame Ruan is my concubine, the stepmother of Jiang Rui and Jiang Rui. The children respect and love her. How can a few malicious rumors tarnish her reputation? My lady, do not be swayed by hearsay and harm the harmony of our family. I had thought forcing them to endure the disgrace of a father's concubine marrying his son would be the best outcome. Yet he would rather tarnish his own name than deny her rightful status. This was to be expected. Given the circumstances, there was no better way to conclude matters. Today, one of us must be utterly disgraced, and that person will be him. I unexpectedly suppressed my usual fiery temper and put on the full display of a virtuous matriarch's decorum. My lord, why didn't you give me any notice? Had I known my sister was visiting, I could have prepared properly instead of making such a disgraceful scene. Bringing her before me without warning. If I appeared cold, it would seem like I was deliberately making things difficult for her. My ignorance caused misunderstanding, and unwittingly led to slander. When all's said and done, the fault lies entirely with me. By rights, taking in a concubine is a grand occasion for the Prime Minister's residence, deserving several banquet tables to celebrate. But our Prime Minister, being a man, is rather thoughtless. He's brought my sister home right on my birthday. How am I supposed to welcome her properly? Though her words were laced with barbs, they were delivered with perfect grace and humility. Even the most etiquette-conscious elder scholar present couldn't find fault with her. Since it's all joyous news regardless, why don't we do this? Let today's modest feast be dedicated to celebrating our Prime Minister and my new sister. After all, birthdays come every year. But marriage is truly the most important matter for a woman. If handled carelessly and she enters the household only to suffer grievances, with all the relatives watching, they'll surely criticize me for being unworthy as the matriarch of the Jiang family. I only hope my sister won't find my birthday arrangements too old-fashioned. Ruan Xintang visibly brightened with excitement, though she had been Jiang Xuanqi's mistress for 2 years. Her public identity remained merely that of a minor official's illegitimate daughter, barely 6th rank. Being able to attend today's banquet was only possible because Jiang Xuanqi had specially sent her an invitation. All along this journey, we've encountered nothing but high-ranking officials and nobility. My childhood friends from the women's quarters have now each been granted imperial honors, bringing glory to 3 generations of their families. My uncles have long held ducal titles, rarely appearing in public, and since my father passed away, they naturally attend as representatives of my maternal family. Even princesses marrying out or princes taking wives might not necessarily gather such a complete assembly of these dignitaries. What an immense honor and glory it would be if this truly became a celebration of her entering the household. Yet all the guests simultaneously changed expressions. 4 people of their status to attend the feast celebrating minister when taking a concubine, thereby elevating her standing. It would be utterly beneath their dignity. Even if they were willing to attend, Jiang Xuanqi wouldn't dare accept such honor, so even though displeased and annoyed by this bothersome couple, his feet remained planted where they stood. At this point, who couldn't see Jiang Xuanqi's intentions, useless himself. Having kept a mistress hidden for 2 years without daring to bring her home, he now used guests at his lawful wife's milestone birthday to pressure her into accepting his concubine. This was clearly taking advantage of his wife's lack of natal family support to manipulate her. They ended up being framed as the villains who deceived others. These 2 shameless individuals might genuinely be scheming to turn the birthday banquet into a wedding ceremony. Jiang Xuanqi wasn't so carried away as to agree outright, but today's events were too abnormal. Every step went completely against his plans. Delays breed complications. It's better to end things sooner rather than later. And all these changes began because of me. His gaze became almost tangible, like a cold serpent slithering up from my ankles, and when it reached my throat, it slowly tightened, killing me inch by inch. In my past life, he killed me imperceptibly just like this. But now that I know there's a snake out to harm me, should I still be afraid? Beyond the Great Wall, I've crushed countless snakes beneath my heel by striking their 7-inch weak spot. Jiang Xuanqi will be the next. Then it's settled. This humble wife shall retire to the inner chambers. You may present tea to me after the banquet concludes. As I turned around, more than half the company rose with me. The invitation requested my presence for Madame Wei's birthday celebration. What manner of banquet is this now? Without proper summons, have we not become unwelcome guests by arriving uninvited? Let us all return home. Consider this day one of fasting. Wan Xintang's face instantly turned deathly pale. And Jiang Xuanqi hadn't expected his reputation to be so utterly worthless. Not even a single moment could make her stay. Gentlemen, please wait. My relationship with Madame Wan is merely about taking a concubine. We privately hosted 2 tables of guests, and the formalities have already been observed. I brought her today only intending to quietly introduce her to my wife for arrangements to enter the household. I never meant to overshadow the host or disturb everyone's refined enjoyment. It was my oversight, thinking only of your virtuous nature, madam, and failing to inform you beforehand. This entire muddle is entirely my fault. He stepped forward to apologize. I beg your forgiveness, madam. Your husband never meant to deceive you. Lady Wan is still young, fond of amusement, and dislikes being constrained by rules, hence I allowed her these years of freedom. Now that she's grown into a proper young lady, I've brought her to pay respects to you, madam, and present tea for entering the household. Having been married for years, he naturally knew exactly what to say to wound me deepest. He waited for me to erupt in anger, to reveal my vulnerable hurt, so he could seize upon my faults and trample me into the mud. Yet I burst out laughing, chiding him playfully. You should have said so earlier. Why take such a roundabout way? They say a prime minister's belly can sail a ship. How could your excellency be so petty as to think I'd refuse? My voice was crisp, devoid of any emotion. It's just taking a concubine. I'm not some newlywed bride to be jealous over such things. Yet Jiang Xuanqi's heart clenched, watching me take my seat. He signaled for tea to be served and had Wan Xintang offer it as if this were truly not the slightest bit of concern. Then he began to care again, clearly wanting to provoke my jealousy so he could take advantage and harm me. Yet now he blames me for not feeling jealous, for not obediently falling into his trap. At this moment, Wan Xintang knelt down to offer tea, deliberately revealing the bracelet on her wrist. Sister, please have some tea. In my past life, she had also flaunted this bracelet before my eyes, much like splashing grease onto flames. That's why I lost my composure so completely. Now, even though the path has changed, she still made the same move. How could I let her charms be wasted on blind eyes? So I played along and asked knowingly, "That bracelet of yours, how come it looks so much like the one the old madam wears?" Jiang Xuanqi sensed something amiss and intended to intervene. But Yuan Xintang had already begun swaying the bracelet while speaking. This was precisely gifted by the elder madam. Last year, when the Chancellor was injured during his campaign in the Northwest, the elder madam saw how diligently I cared for him and thus bestowed this upon me. One dare not refuse an elder's gift. If madam fancies it, I'd naturally be delighted to pass it on, though I'd first need to consult the elder madam. I accepted the tea but didn't drink it, setting it aside before rising to curtsy. "May your excellency grant me a letter of divorce." Wen Qing dropped the teapot and cups she was holding, exclaiming in shock, "This is the Jiang family heirloom, passed down only to the principal wife. How could the dowager do this? What position does this leave our mistress?" Nanny Ju threw herself at Jiang Xuanqi's feet, wailing, "Our mistress has been married into the Jiang family for 30 years, bearing your excellency children and serving the dowager with utmost devotion. Which of the 7 grounds for divorce has she violated? How could the dowager prefer to pass the heirloom to an outsider rather than acknowledge our mistress? Could it be that seeing our Wei family has no one left, you're in such haste to drive our mistress away?" Speaking of the Wei family having no heirs, father's comrades were already glaring in anger. Yet the first to reprimand wasn't them, but the grand preceptor from the late emperor's court, a man over 80 years old. Even if he were to strike Jiang Xuanqi's head with his cane, the latter would have to endure it. Now, the old man was puffing his beard and glaring, outrageous, preposterous. As the Chancellor of Letters and a model for scholars across the land, how could you act so recklessly in private? How dare you disrupt the proper order between wife and concubine, violating ritual propriety, according to our dynasty's legal statutes, when a wife exists? Any man who elevates a concubine to wife status shall receive 90 strokes of the rod and must rectify the situation. The judicial principle states, improper conduct cannot be tolerated, ritual laws cannot be transgressed. Such behavior could still be deceitfully defended as merely favoring a concubine over the wife, which would only constitute a moral failing. Using the ceremonial rites reserved for taking a principal wife, if there is evidence suggesting he elevated a concubine to wife status, this would rise to a matter of ritual propriety and could be grounds for legal prosecution. This was the real threat to Jiang Xuanqi's reputation. The book lavishly described how exceptionally Jiang Xuanqi treated Yuan Xintang. Though welcoming an unofficial consort mimicked the rites of marrying a principal wife, it was all conducted behind closed doors. Creating its own secluded world, this bracelet serves as irrefutable evidence. The inheritance of family heirlooms determines a lineage's legitimacy, yet it had long been passed to an illegitimate branch, creating such disorder that it angered the Grand Tutor who upheld propriety as divine law. My mother-in-law always resented me for being 5 years older than Jiang Xuanqi and coming from a military family, unable to advance his official career, after bearing a son and a daughter. She never conceived again, nor would she give me that heirloom jade bracelet. After Yuan Xintang entered the household, relying on this advantage, everyone treated her as the rightful mistress. Though I bore the title of wife, the authority and status within the household increasingly leaned toward her. How could one not hate this? How could one not go mad? With Jiang Xuanqi being collectively condemned, changing from taking a concubine to divorcing his wife, my uncles, aunts, and relatives naturally had every reason to intervene. Yuan Xintang never expected the situation to escalate so seriously. Whether it was genuine or not, she simply clutched her chest and fainted on the spot. It was a clever move, one that could give Jiang Xuanqi an opportunity to slip away. That depends on whether I allow it or not. Jiang Xuanqi was just about to carry Yuan Xintang away when he shouted, "Summon the court physician." But Granny Ju nimbly rose to her feet and shoved him aside. Men and women should not touch when giving or receiving. Miss Yuan hasn't entered your household yet, better let this old woman handle it. This Miss Yuan's constitution is far too weak, fainting after just kneeling briefly. I fear she'll struggle with childbearing later. In my youth, I served as an army medic. Let me examine what ails her so we can treat it promptly. She felt the pulse while murmuring, "The pulse rolls like beads, this is the pulse of pregnancy, already over 4 months." Nanny Ju moved swiftly and spoke loudly. No matter what Jiang Xuanqi wanted to do now, it was already too late. She shoved the person back into Jiang Xuanqi's arms. "Take her back." This old woman worried too much, thinking the Prime Minister cherished Miss Wan so much. "Turns out you've already kissed her and gotten her pregnant," she kept muttering, "and still has the nerve to call her a virtuous lady. The Prime Minister truly has no shame." At last, even someone as shameless as Jiang Xuanqi was infuriated by this series of maneuvers, though it might also have been due to the heavy impact from earlier. Madame Ju caught Wan Xintang just before he hit the ground, letting him collapse stiffly while she prattled on, heedless of whether anyone could hear her. "Why has His Excellency fainted too? Seems His Excellency is truly the one in need of examination. Such a frail constitution, hardly conducive to producing heirs. No wonder Our Lady has borne only 2 in all these years." The stage was still alive with the vibrant opera performance. Even the most renowned troops in the capital couldn't rival the grand spectacle put on by the Prime Minister's residence. The murmuring crowd buzzing like a duck pond. Aunts and sisters comforted and consoled me, while uncles, brothers, and the Jiang family elders demanded explanations. Jiang Xuanqi's rivals could hardly wait to flee the banquet and draft their impeachment memorials. To beat a drowning dog, speed is everything. Moving too slowly might mean too much repetition of the same content, and before securing the top spot, His Majesty would already be weary. Struggling to find excuses, they were scratching their heads in desperation when the serving maid arrived with trays of dishes. Beneath a small bowl lay a blank memorial. The maid smiled sweetly. "Our mistress is most impartial. Who wouldn't give a thumbs up and exclaim, 'What noble righteousness from Our Lady!' Sacrificing familial ties for righteousness, how could that not be considered noble?" After Jiang Xuanqi regained consciousness, the banquet had already ended. He actually brought Wan Xintang directly into the main courtyard, and continued to do so thereafter. "If this goes on, who would still regard me, the mistress of the house, with any respect? The bracelet from my past life." The main courtyard in this life, these subtle yet unmistakable shifts of power slowly tighten the strings of tension in one's mind. From now on, the slightest provocation would make me flare up like a cat with its tail stepped on. Others couldn't understand why, let alone empathize with my unpredictable moods. Wouldn't they just think me a madwoman? Such meticulous craftsmanship, such ruthless psychological warfare. With hair coiled and inkstone ground, Nurse Ju took out my official robe to press it smooth. A letter emerged from within the palace walls, inquiring whether the Wei family still had descendants versed in military strategy, or if we could recommend capable generals to lead troops. The original book had assumed mere farces, and a few memorials would suffice to incur the imperial couple's displeasure toward me, leading to such severe punishment. Yet in truth, the farces were but surface ripples. This letter was the undercurrent. After the late emperor's passing and the new emperor's ascension to the throne, a hunting expedition was arranged to test loyalty and reclaim military power. The emperor intentionally summoned my father close by and released a ferocious beast. To protect His Majesty, my father fought the beast despite his advanced age. Though he succeeded in killing it, he suffered severe injuries. His internal organs were ruptured, and he vomited blood incessantly when carried back. He had already seen through the scheme. On his deathbed, he repeatedly warned me never to involve myself in court politics, nor to harbor resentment against the imperial family or seek revenge. Hatred has its end, but love knows no bounds. He only wished for me and my child to preserve ourselves, living out our days in peace and prosperity. To this end, he had long exhausted all efforts to elevate Jiang Xuanqi for years, raising him to the rank of a first-grade official. Believing these dozen years would be enough to discern human nature, that Jiang Xuanqi could safeguard my peace for the rest of my life. Alas, the human heart is the hardest to understand and the easiest to change. When the new emperor first ascended the throne, peace prevailed across the land. Now, nearly 20 years later, wild wolves at the borders have gained a new alpha, eyeing the realm with covetous intent. For 2 decades, he indulged in pleasures, prioritizing culture over military might. Still believing himself the supreme ruler commanding formidable armies as in his youth, Only upon abruptly learning of powerful forces invading the borders did he finally remember the Wei family. When my children were young, I often urged them to practice martial arts, but after they turned 7, Jiang Xuanxi steered them toward scholarly pursuits. Born into wealth and privilege, they had long despised the hardships of martial training. In the end, I couldn't prevail against their willful ways. Now, apart from me, the Wei family has no descendants left who practice martial arts. The emperor refused to admit his past suspicions were mistaken, much less accept his dashed hopes. Humiliated and enraged, he seized the opportunity to vent his anger on me. Otherwise, how could mere farcical theatrics and a few memorials shake someone like me, sheltered by the Wei family's illustrious merits? Now I write in my memorial. Why seek armchair strategists when before me stands one who has led armies through countless battles unscathed? Thus I recommend myself. Father, forgive me for not fulfilling your wishes. I would rather die wrapped in horsehide upon a bloody battlefield than be imprisoned in this four-walled cage, perishing by my own silken bonds. The sky still held scattered stars as I stepped out in official robes, the manor already brightly lit. Jiang Xuanxi always made such a commotion when leaving for morning court. My pair of children and household would always see me off at the manor gates. Only today, Wan Xintang had joined them, those two clinging together in tender reluctance, unbearably affectionate. Jiang Xuanxi wiped away the moisture from that small face. Just now you refused to sleep when I told you to, and now you're drowsy again, with tears streaming down as if someone had bullied you. The little one in his arms murmured sleepily, "This is my first time seeing you off to court since I entered the mansion. Of course I couldn't miss it, lest others think I'm growing arrogant from your favor. If I choose to spoil you, then you're free to be as willful as you please. Whoever dares gossip shall have their tongue cut out." His domineering declaration would have been fine left unsaid. The moment he uttered it, it stirred Nurse Ju's rebellious spirit. The Prime Minister has truly soared to great heights now, abandoning both official reputation and propriety. Yesterday's 90 lashes were overlooked since you fainted, but now you're bent on abusing innocent household servants. Are you truly determined to become an outlaw? The Jiang family rose from poverty to nobility, so naturally they had no hereditary servants. Most in their household came from respectable families. Inflicting injuries, causing death, or maiming innocent household servants would also be punished. Under normal circumstances, Nanny Ju might have exercised some restraint, but the thought of what I was about to do next made her throw all caution to the wind. "How dare you? Is this how Madam usually disciplines those under her care? How can I trust your ability to manage the household affairs like this? In that case, from now on, hand over the housekeeping token to Madam Wan. Madam has worked hard for so many years. It's time for her to rest." Wan Xintang smiled gently. "Although I come from humble origins, I do know a thing or two about household management. Sister need not worry, give it to her." All her self-deprecating pride and disgusting words meant for me got stuck in her throat. Neither of them believed I would let go so readily. It wasn't until Nanny Ju actually untied her waist token and disdainfully tossed it before them. Jiang Xuanxi spoke gloomily. "It's good that you've come to terms with it. After so many years of marriage, let's consider yesterday's matter settled. You've rarely come to see me off. The night is deep and the dew heavy. You should return and rest early. Knowing I fainted, His Majesty has already sent a carriage today. It wouldn't do to keep the eunuch waiting. He could say let's drop the matter today precisely because he spotted the imperial carriage and horses." Mistakenly thinking the emperor approved of his actions, they'd come specifically to tip him off. What a pity. The next moment, the eunuch scurried over to me with an ingratiating smile. "General, you're early. It's still far from court assembly time. His Majesty has implemented many reforms in the palace recently. Concerned that Your Excellency hasn't attended court for many years and might be unfamiliar with the roads, he specially dispatched carriages to fetch you. Furthermore, fearing the night journey might be difficult, he ordered imperial guards to light the way with lanterns. Would Your Excellency prefer to ride in a carriage or on horseback?" I swung onto my horse, my court robes adorned with pearls and jade glistening brilliantly under the lantern light, my hair styled in a heroine's bun and wrapped in brocade. This was the female official system and court attire established by the late empress 3 or 4 decades ago, details Jiang Xuanqi had long forgotten. Now that the lights are bright, I can see this garment clearly. Embroidered on the shoulders is a chelin, symbolizing a first-rank military official. Matching the crane on his chest, looking down from above, I see Jiang Xuanqi's face alternating between green and pale. Your Excellency doesn't look well. Perhaps it would be best to take leave and skip court today. Jiang Xuanqi flicked his sleeve and turned away. No need for Madam's concern. How could I let you perform a solo act when you lodge your complaint before the Emperor? I'll stop here and say no more. Spurring my horse to depart, I gave him a kind warning if he dies of anger. It serves him right. Anyway, whoever impeaches Jiang Xuanqi today, I'll go lend a hand. The imperial court hasn't seen a female official in over a decade. I stood at the head of the military officials, while the civil officials seethed with resentment and the warriors remained silent. The civil officials also assumed I had come to lodge an imperial complaint, yet their faces still wore expressions of disdain, though many would impeach Jiang Xuanqi today for moral failings. Their attacks were permissible, part of political warfare. I could not voice grievances, for it would tarnish Jiang Xuanqi's public dignity and violate wifely virtue. There should have been many people ready to impeach Jiang Xuanqi, but now they all fell silent. I looked back and saw that all the military officers were my brothers and nephews, revealing that no fresh blood had been added in over a decade. It wasn't until the arrogant emperor atop the dome revealed news of enemy troops threatening the border that the civil officials, united against me, finally erupted in outrage. When the emperor asked if anyone could lead troops to defend the frontier, silence once again filled the court. The purges from years ago had long made military families overly cautious. Many descendants merely inherited titles. On ordinary days they couldn't even lift a block of tofu, let alone charge into battle. I stepped forward and bowed deeply. This humble official is willing to go. I beg your majesty to grant me an official post and the tiger tally, so I may lead troops to garrison the frontier in 3 months. The deathly silent court erupted once more, like a lazy donkey that only brays when kicked. Jiang Xuanqi immediately stepped forward. Madam, what are you doing? If you resent me for yesterday's matter, as your husband I admit my fault. I'll divorce Lady Wan and send her home. And repent from this day forward. Why must you abandon yourself to despair? If you were to lose your life, would you not condemn me to lifelong sorrow? My wife hasn't practiced spearplay for many years. She's inevitably grown rusty and unfit for great responsibilities. Her actions just now were merely a moment of desperation. I beg your majesty not to take it seriously. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead. Directly ahead stood the auspicious beast guarding the steps beneath the emperor's throne, cast from bronze and weighing several hundred pounds. I beg your majesty to permit this subject to prove himself. The emperor had no objections. Jiang Xuanqi today cared only for personal grievances, showing not the slightest consideration for His Majesty's difficulties. Now he would certainly show no favoritism toward his former favorite. He too wished to see whether I possessed the capability to lead troops into battle. I stepped forward 2 paces, thrust my hand into the auspicious beast's mouth, and with a surge of energy, lifted hundreds of pounds of bronze effortlessly with one arm. Such divine strength, forget leading troops. It would be more than sufficient to serve as a regional commander. I returned the auspicious beast to its original position without even a sound of it knocking against the floor, except, Your Majesty. Forgive this crime. The auspicious beast's head has been deformed by my grip. For a moment, silence reigned supreme. Does the Prime Minister perhaps have a more suitable candidate to recommend? I would gladly step aside for someone more capable. Jiang Xuanqi fell silent. To recommend someone now would not be seen as promotion, but as making enemies. The emperor spoke. Enough. If the Prime Minister has no recommendations, then withdraw. Do not let personal matters interfere with official duties. With just a few glances from Jiang Xuanqi, his loyal followers stepped forward to speak. A husband as chancellor, a wife as general, one governing civil affairs, the other commanding military forces, both holding high positions. Wouldn't the imperial court become their family's domain? Such concentrated power raises suspicions of factionalism and private scheming. We implore your majesty to reconsider. Voices like these grew increasingly numerous. The emperor also pondered. indeed. Since ancient times, there has never been a precedent for husband and wife serving together as officials. Jiang Xuanqi immediately humbled himself. My lady, you may still file an imperial complaint against me, as long as it makes you change your mind. I am willing to accept any punishment His Majesty decrees. He seemed confident of victory, as if compromise was certain to come from my side, yet I pulled a document from my sleeve and knelt to present it. Using internal energy to ensure my voice carried to every corner of the court, I, your humble servant, am willing to divorce my husband to serve the nation. From this day forth, I sever all ties with the Jiang family and swear this military pledge: I shall not return to the capital until the Rongdi invaders are vanquished. If they're not husband and wife, can't they serve together in court? What's the big deal? The emperor personally stamped the divorce decree with his imperial seal, declaring it a forced separation. From now on, even if they wanted to remarry, it would count as defying imperial orders. Even if Jiang Xuanqi had objections, he'd just have to swallow them. He would certainly not sacrifice himself for his wife and marriage by doing something as foolish as resigning from office. He simply felt that since yesterday, everything had slipped beyond his control, to the point where certain things were now completely out of his grasp. He had considered that I might be angry, might resist, or even seek revenge. I never considered that I would simply cut the ground from under my own feet. It turns out yesterday's initial compromise was only meant to facilitate today's withdrawal. But this shouldn't be happening. The emperor burst into laughter and actually descended from his dragon throne to personally help me up. For a moment, all officials bowed their heads, leaving only me and the emperor standing. Sister Wei, please rise. Since the late emperor regarded you as his adopted daughter, you are naturally my adopted sister. Today, I shall confer upon you the title of Junzhu. I knelt on one knee. Your Majesty's grace is profound, however, as I am to guard the frontier. Granting me the title of Junzhu, neither an official rank nor a noble title, may lead to soldiers' discontent and enemy generals' contempt. Any occasional defeat might tarnish the royal reputation. Now that I have divorced my husband, I naturally belong to the Wei family. I humbly request your Majesty to grant me the right to inherit the family title. When father passed away, he held the title of Duke. Now that I am to inherit his rank, I shall be made a marquis. The emperor agreed after only a brief consideration. After all, the Wei family had only me, a woman, left. Even if I inherited the title, it would end with me. What harm could there be in that? From this moment onward, I am no longer myself. I am a marquis. Standing here, you wouldn't dare look at me the same way you did just moments ago. Only when the emperor returned to his dragon throne did today's hunt targeting Jiang Xuanqi truly begin. For I was no longer Jiang Xuanqi's wife, but the marquis standing at the head of the military officials. This humble official impeaches minister when for disorderly arrangement of wives and concubines, knowingly violating the law. I beseech your Majesty to punish him according to the statutes. I humbly impeach minister when rumors have been compiled into books. How can the dignified chief minister of our nation tolerate having his romantic escapades adapted into operettas circulating through streets and alleys? Official positions are bestowed by His Majesty. One who so carelessly tarnishes his official reputation is unworthy of being a model for scholars. Many voices rose in agreement. In the past, when Jiang Xuanqi brought Wan Xintang to meet colleagues, they would either offer friendly banter or good-natured teasing upon hearing the rumors. Such gossip was considered romantic dalliance, a mark of distinction for him. Scholars even elevated their affair to become this dynasty's version of the legendary Hongfu's midnight elopement. The tale of Hongfu's midnight elopement has been passed down through the ages. If his story could be mentioned in the same breath, it would benefit his posthumous reputation. Little did he expect these people to turn heartless in an instant, using it as grounds to attack him and as proof of his moral failings. Some even submitted memorials accusing Wan Xintang, an official's daughter who became his unofficial concubine without proper matchmaking or betrothal, of wanton behavior for openly entering his residence and corrupting public morals. Even Wan Xiuzhuan, standing at the lowest rank, wasn't spared from accusations. Yesterday, memorials had already begun pouring into the palace like snowflakes, piling high on the emperor's desk, enough to give anyone a headache. Among these matters, Apart from the disorderly conduct concerning wives and concubines, the rest were hardly significant. How many officials kept their hands completely clean in private? He knew this all too well, yet it wasn't until the court session that he realized so many had impeached Jiang Xuanxi. Clearly, this minister of culture had made numerous enemies at court, to the extent that even these trivial matters were magnified into grounds for impeachment. It was truly shameful. Perhaps it was time he re-evaluated Jiang Xuanxi. Moreover, I still stood in the imperial court as his last remaining hope. This matter couldn't be treated with severity only to be dismissed lightly. Thus, I rebuked the man harshly and ordered him to the Ministry of Justice to receive the punishment reserved for those who violate the hierarchy between wives and concubines. It was merely a symbolic 9 strokes of the rod after all. He was an important minister. Punishing him too severely would only wound His Majesty's dignity. Just when I thought everything would settle, I seized the moment to impeach Jiang Xuanxi for the crime of privately mobilizing troops. That night's military movements caused quite a stir, and the capital garrison found it difficult to suppress, yet it was inappropriate to demand explanations from Chancellor when, as I still hold the nominal post of general, I had no choice but to take advantage of my birthday celebration to send gifts along with an inquiry, asking how this matter should be handled. This matter is of grave importance now, and your humble servant truly doesn't know what to do. Only, considering our past as husband and wife, I beg your Majesty to show leniency in your judgment. After all, Jiang Xuanxi's face turned pale, inch by inch. The Prime Minister merely flew into a rage for his beloved. It's not as if he committed treason or rebellion. Upon investigation, the Emperor discovered that Jiang Xuanxi had led an entire battalion of soldiers in the dead of night, their hooves thundering as they stormed through the city gates with his token, all just to chase after his runaway mistress who was carrying his child. This was simply intolerable, a blatant disregard for imperial authority. How audacious, outrageous. Jiang Xuanxi passed out from the pain after receiving fewer than 20 strokes of the imperial rod. The Emperor, still furious, ordered the remaining strokes to be recorded and administered once Jiang recovered. I returned to the residence with Jiang Xuanxi, whose body was a bloody mess from the beating. The old madam wailed bitterly and threw herself upon him. My poor child, Wan Xintang, her eyes blurred with tears, gently caressed Jiang Xuanxi's pale lips and face. Jiang Rui stood nearby, one clenching his fists, the other covering her mouth. I must have lodged a fierce complaint today to bring about such consequences. Does mother only know how to bully others by flaunting her status? Just because you're born noble with powerful families backing you, you think you can oppress your own husband like this? Yesterday's family scandal being exposed was bad enough, but today you even secretly reported father, getting him beaten like this. Jiang Rui was seething with rage. He'd been holding back his anger since yesterday, having barely managed to stay out of trouble himself and not daring to speak up. Today, emboldened by the old madam's return, he finally felt he had someone to back him up. My father holds the position of chief counselor. How could you persecute me so relentlessly? Jiang Rui couldn't hold him back from behind. Thinking of what Jiang Rui would face next, she turned away and shut her eyes tightly, not daring to look. The next moment, the sound of a slap exploded like firecrackers. Jiang Rui, a scholar whose mastery of the 6 arts was nothing remarkable, was sent flying by the blow. Not until he stumbled wretchedly against the threshold did he realize how suddenly he had arrived here. I only hit Jiang Rui. Forgetting about you, this unfilial and rebellious wretch. You twins, since childhood, have demanded that I show no favoritism. Whatever your sister had, I made sure to give you the same. The mentioned Jiang Rui shrank back, trying to make herself less noticeable. She thought bitterly to herself, there's still a difference. Mother cares more about me. The old lady, who had lost both son and grandson, let out a piercing shriek. Ah, you vile woman! Where have your 3 obediences and 4 virtues gone? How dare you act so insolently before me? If I don't make you suffer every punishment of family discipline today, tomorrow I'll go beat the grievance drum. I'll have you shackled and thrown in prison. My eyes turned cold as I recalled the Jiang family's thick book of rules, half of which were devoted to various punishments. Those targeting women were especially harsh: twisting breasts, piercing fingernails, stripping clothes for flogging. By the time the whole ordeal was done, the condemned woman would often throw herself into the river before they could even drown her in a pig cage. I saw her hand coming at my face, fingers curled. This strike was likely meant to disfigure me. I took just one step back, and her entire momentum lost its target, sending her tumbling to the ground like a twisted rope. Her bony claws couldn't retract in time and ended up striking her own face instead. This provoked an even more pig-slaughtering screech of agony. "You're asking for death. Go report to the authorities. Someone go report this. This wretched woman dares to strike her mother-in-law. Drag her to the Yarman and make her roll on the nail-board." In recent years, the imperial court has placed increasing emphasis on filial piety, even failing to serve one's in-laws when they're hungry, thirsty, or ill warrants corporal punishment among impoverished families. It's not uncommon for parents-in-law feigning illness to demand meat, forcing households to sell children, boys as laborers and girls as prostitutes. The old hag had often tried to torment me with this, but couldn't find any leverage. After suffering plenty of self-inflicted mishaps from mishandling things, she eventually avoided me altogether. Now that she's caught me, she's bound to indulge in all those years of pent-up mother-in-law tyranny, even when she was a daughter-in-law herself. There weren't nearly so many harsh rules. What a pity. I'm no longer her daughter-in-law. Just as I was about to present the divorce decree bearing the imperial seal, a sharp rebuke suddenly rang out behind me. "How dare you attempt assassination against Marquis Guanxue? Drag this meddlesome old woman to the imperial dungeons to be punished for attempting to murder a noble." Without turning my head, I fiddled with the pearls on my sleeve. "Can't I handle this myself? Who are you, old fool, to tell me how to do things?" With her own supporters falling one by one, Wan Xintang seemed to have finally found someone who could control me. "Sister, how could you insult Princess Huishu? I know you despise me and resent the Prime Minister, but that's no reason to drag the entire Prime Minister's residence down with you." She knelt again in obeisance. "If your Highness wishes to punish anyone, punish me. It was my fault for angering sister, which made her speak disrespectfully to you. This has nothing to do with anyone else in the Prime Minister's residence. Please don't hold them accountable." Jiang Rui wished her arms could grow longer today. Why couldn't she sprout 8 hands to cover everyone's mouths? Why hadn't her mother birthed her as Neza? For the first time, she spoke sharply to Wan Xintang. "Who asked you to butt in? If you want a beating, go pester mother yourself. The princess hasn't even spoken yet. How dare you presume to confess crimes on our behalf?" To be fair, one couldn't entirely blame Wan Xintang for lacking perception. This Princess Huishu was indeed notorious, her conduct bearing no resemblance whatsoever to her virtuous title. When a court official once memorialized the emperor about her licentious behavior, demanding she be banished to a nunnery, she responded by having all male members of that official's family castrated and sent to become monks instead. Thus, their 7 roots were purified most thoroughly indeed. Thus, a eunuch temple was erected in the capital, thriving with incense offerings. Mostly women visited to burn incense, making it an exceptionally pure sanctuary. Everyone was quite satisfied. Even the emperor could do nothing about her, and censors couldn't risk death to remonstrate. After all, the late emperor and empress had gifted her several chests of immunity medals. Even if she castrated every official in court, she'd never exhaust her stockpile. From then on, no one dared to utter half a word against her. The familiar fragrance lingered, as if summer lotuses bloomed amidst snowy days. This princess is in good spirits today and originally had no intention of arguing with this chatterbox, but since you've admitted your guilt, it would be improper for me not to punish you. You should go to the dungeon too." I turned back. "She's still pregnant." Li Shuangtian feigned innocence. "Then arrange a double room for her." After a moment's thought, I said, "To avoid it being too empty, why not have Jiang Xuanxi accompany her? Newlyweds must be inseparable. It's only natural he'd volunteer to tend his beautiful concubine in the imperial prison. His Majesty will surely understand." I glanced at Jiang Rui and Jiang Rui, one dazed like a clubbed goose, the other shrinking like a quail. Well, the prison cell makes a fine reunion spot for their family of three generations under one roof. Li Shuangtian and I exchanged knowing smiles. Years of estrangement vanished in an instant, as if we had never parted ways. The princess certainly knows how to pick her days. You grace us with your presence only after my birthday has passed. Li Shuangtian waved his hand, and a crowd rushed into the minister's residence to start moving things. Heard about your joyous divorce, didn't I come to help you move your dowry? With a flick of her wrist, the long scroll unfurled to the ground, folding into several layers of creases. I've brought your dowry list. We'll check off each item as we move them, Miss One, and you'll repay tenfold. The elderly madam, previously dragged to the imperial prison and frightened speechless, found unexpected courage from somewhere. Breaking free from her captors, she planted herself squarely before the prime minister's residence. No moving. So what if she's a princess? The emperor's laws bind high and low alike. Whoever dares touch so much as a blade of grass from the prime minister's residence today, I'll dash my brains out right here. Do you still dare to trample on human lives and resort to outright robbery? The prime minister's household always operates by first knocking, then striking, and finally threatening. But now they've knocked on the head of Li Shuangtian. This demon king of chaos, she certainly knows how to pick her battles. People just say things casually, and someone actually believes it. Then what does that make of my fate that I exhausted all my luck to be born into? If you're going to crash, do it early. Hey, someone, fetch a coroner and bring a coffin along. Strive to die here, so they can immediately perform the autopsy, and coffin, box you up, and carry you away. We'll hold your funeral today, bury you in yellow earth. And rid the world of one more scourge. Li Shuangtian ordered her to be tied to a chair and placed at the entrance of the prime minister's residence. Every time a chest was carried out, it would be meticulously inventoried and announced in front of her, displayed with utmost care. Watching the gold and silver treasures that had entered the prime minister's residence, now as good as hers, being taken away was more painful than having her heart gouged out. She wanted to close her eyes and not look. But someone was specially assigned to hold her eyelids open. Her heart ached so much she nearly fainted, but a physician stood by, pricking her philtrum with blunt silver needles. In my past life, she crushed me countless times under the weight of filial piety, convinced that Ruan Xintang was her true daughter-in-law, yet demanding that I fulfill all the duties of one. By then I was no longer the meticulous Wei Fengming of old. Seeing only that adulterous pair as my lifelong enemies while overlooking the demons lurking nearby, she had gathered plenty of dirt on me and spent her days threatening and intimidating. Though uncles often sent aunts to check on me, preventing her from employing the family's most vicious punishments openly, the covert torments she inflicted were no less cruel. Her favorite was sending me to kneel in the ancestral hall. Outsiders praised her mercy, saying she merely made me repent without physical suffering. Little did I know that the cotton padding of the kneeling cushion concealed finely crushed pebbles, cold and unyielding, tolerable at first, but as the cotton compressed, the stones began to bite, bruises formed within minutes, and prolonged kneeling bred festering wounds. Yet outsiders dismissed my pain as mere affectation. Had I refused, that serpent-tongued crone would have sent her evidence to the magistrates, persecuting 3 generations of my family and forcing my father's reburial from his imperial mausoleum to some desolate field. Now I wonder, how could such a crude snare have trapped me? Even if I were completely out of my mind, I wouldn't be so easily manipulated. Suppressing my doubts, I walked home with Li Shuangtian. This isn't the way to my house. We were about the same age. She was already 50, yet her appearance hadn't changed much from that dazzlingly beautiful woman of years past. Just more composed, with a more restrained presence. Now that Sister Feng holds the noble title of Marquis Guanxue, naturally she must have her own residence. I've seized the 7th prince's mansion for you. It's just been completed and awaits its master's arrival. The 7th prince was her nephew, recently enfeoffed as a commandery prince and about to establish his residence outside the palace. To have his mansion seized before he could even move in, truly. He encountered misfortune at the worst possible time. Marquis Guanxue, I got you this title, doesn't it sound grand? When Sister Feng entered the court, all the officials fell silent like sparrows. None dare speak loudly, listen instead to the phoenix's song. You are naturally the crown of all birds. She moved remarkably fast. No sooner had I stepped through the palace gates than she'd secured me both a residence and this title. The emperor wasn't completely obedient to her wishes. So accomplishing all this in such a short time must have required extraordinary effort. I sighed deeply. How many golden pardons did you use this time? The late Empress arranged your whole life's provisions. Yet you're not even 50, spend them more sparingly. She's been like this since childhood, committing capital offenses daily as if collecting them. Before her passing, the late Empress left her chests full of golden pardons. From then on, whenever she committed wrongdoing or made requests, the Emperor would invariably demand she exchange them with gold medals, one granted, one destroyed. No matter how abundant, gold medals would eventually run out. That day would mark Li Shuangtian's reckoning, for this princess, born of the same mother, had also participated in the struggle for succession. She was even once considered for the position of crown princess. Li Shuangtian smiled and leaned close to my ear. There were originally many more, but the emperor refused to relent. Day and night he coveted those golden tokens in my possession. What harm would it do if I gave them all to him? I kept just one as a memento. I knew that when the golden tokens ran out, it would be my day on the gallows. But now that you've left the Prime Minister's residence, I knew I could never die no matter what. Those gold medals are just making a roundabout trip. They'll end up back in my hands eventually. That last one, right before stepping out the door, I was told to throw it into the well too. The 3-month deadline loomed urgently over the gathering of troops. I frequently visited my uncle's homes, listening to their teachings, practicing military strategies with them on sand tables, and engaging in combat drills with talented commanders recommended by various families. Many of them had emerged during critical moments in their past lives, only to ultimately fade into obscurity under the chaotic commands of foolish rulers and treacherous ministers. Yet I faced no such disadvantage of being constrained by an emperor. With Li Shuangtian holding firm in the capital and numerous military nobles as my backing, I had no worries behind me. In the 3rd month, I appointed generals and led the expedition, gathering troops from across the land. The thunderous roar of military drills filled the training grounds as we pointed our swords toward the Romdi barbarians. The emperor had suppressed the battle reports for a long time, waiting until he found a commander capable of matching the enemy before making them public. News from the border surged forth like a breached flood, inundating the entire realm. Behind Vermilion gates, song and dance continued as before. They didn't believe the flames of war would reach the capital. Yet this didn't stop them from witnessing the rising influence of military leaders. Since ancient times, military officers have only been truly valued when war arrives. The alleyway outside the Marquis of Guanxua's residence was packed with congratulatory visitors the very next day after the ennoblement. Even Jiang Rui and Jiang Rui managed to squeeze their way in, boldly parading under the pretense of being my children while attempting to cut in line straight to the Marquis's gates. They actually had the audacity to approach WN Qing, who was dispersing the crowd at the entrance, pretending to be familiar. "It's only been a few days, how could you forget us, miss? We siblings know we've displeased mother, so we've come today bearing birch rods to beg forgiveness." WN Qing's face remained cold. "The Marquis of Guanxua has severed all ties with the Jiang family. May I ask if you too have changed your surname to Wei today?" Jiang Rui immediately flared up. "Does the young lady presume that just because mother has risen in status, she can trample upon the dignity of the Prime Minister's household, other than live-in sons-in-law, whose children in this world take their mother's surname?" WN Qing refused to listen further. This is clearly a deliberate attempt to fabricate lingering ties between the Marquis's residence and the Prime Minister's estate, a scheme to make His Majesty suspect our Marquis Guanxua. "Guards, escort these two out, men and horses alike." Jiang Rui lifted her skirts and fled. "No need for your concern, miss, I'll take my leave first." Jiang Rui, who still wanted to argue with WN Qing, was immediately hoisted midair by 2 soldiers crossing their arms beneath him, paraded out in full view of everyone. WN Qing looked at his no longer clean and tidy old clothes, sneering contemptuously. "A giant baby who can't survive without his mother's dowry, go crawl back to your father's arms for milk." The Prime Minister's residence was now in dire straits. The emperor harbored deep resentment over Jiang Xuanxi's unauthorized mobilization of troops and turned a blind eye to Li Shuangtian throwing them into the imperial prison. The 3 endured immense suffering before being released. only to face an emptied prime minister's residence upon their return. For someone like Jiang Xuanxi, who rose from humble beginnings in plain garments to enter the ministerial halls, choosing loyalty meant inevitable poverty, while seeking wealth could only lead to becoming a sycophant, without the support of family heritage or opportunities to distinguish oneself through meritorious deeds worthy of reward. Accepting too many gifts from others would constitute bribery, naturally incurring countless debts of gratitude. There remains one straightforward path to amass substantial wealth: marriage alliances. Back when Jiang Xuanxi married me, to put it bluntly, it was essentially an exchange of interests veiled by affection, so no matter how deeply he and Ruan Xintang fell for each other, he could never divorce me, let alone cast me aside. The only way he could continue to leech off me was by keeping me tightly confined within his household. Only with my death as his wife could he rightfully claim everything that belonged to me, completing the transformation from commoner to aristocratic family. If I leave, how could his salary possibly support such a vast ministerial mansion? The current ministerial mansion resembles an ant nest built on loose soil, superficially operating as usual, yet its actual collapse is imminent, progressing at a visibly rapid pace. Jiang Rui's unwashed old clothes were an omen. Silk is delicate, and light-colored garments are even harder to maintain, especially when the capital's fashions change in the blink of an eye. In the past, outer robes stained with grease or ink would have been considered ruined. How could the distinguished young master of the chancellor's residence possibly wear them again? Wen Qing suppressed her gloating desire and addressed the crowd loudly. Marquis Guanxue acknowledges his lack of merit and dares not occupy a new residence, having yet to bring honor to his family. He also dares not return to his old home. For now, he lodges at Princess Huaishu's estate. Those who wish to see him may send their calling cards. The densely packed crowd instantly scattered like frightened birds and beasts. They dispersed even faster than Jiang Rui, who'd been thrown out moments earlier, making Wen Qing's lips twitch involuntarily. Truly living up to that fearsome reputation, capable of silencing crying children at night, swift and thunderous indeed. In my final year or two before death, I'd ceased battling over petty harem intrigues, spending my days like a mad recluse in the most remote courtyard. The only solace came from the battle reports Nurse Ju managed to procure for me. Piecing together tactics from one engagement after another, I'd alternate between scolding curses and clapping laughter. Often I'd wonder, when the Emperor slipped me that secret letter during my birthday banquet, who should I have recommended? Or had I taken command myself, how might I have deployed troops to turn defeat into victory? After countless rehearsals, the sandy soil of the rear courtyard bore deep scars from willow branches tracing battle formations. What were once powerless fantasies after the fact had transformed into a universe within my chest, now operating with effortless mastery. Li Shuangtian saw me bustling about every day without a moment's rest, so she had someone tie me up with ropes just to force me to take a break. In the end, a group of iron-willed women collapsed like scattered sparks from hammered iron. Li Shuangtian stroked her chin. If we have such a session every day from now on, wouldn't it save us the trouble of training? I rolled my eyes, changed into a persimmon-colored brocade robe, and went out with her. She took me to a tea house to listen to storytelling, where the performer began vividly recounting tales he'd worn his lips thin telling lately, all without requiring extra tips. This alone speaks to its overwhelming popularity, surpassing even the hype around that courtesan Hongfu from 2 years ago, which literati had drummed up. Nowadays, no one would dare make such comparisons. It would be downright insulting to the legacy of the 3 heroes of the wind and dust. The protagonist of these tales is named He Yu, derived from the saying "great wisdom appears foolish," narrating the story of this young master He and his powerful father's newly wedded concubine, Zhou Qiang. Why transform Jiang into wisdom and Rui into folly? Why make Xin Tang resemble old Qiong? Anyone with eyes can see whose family served as the prototype. Ever since that birthday banquet scene, it became clear that the story pursued for years wouldn't reach its second climax. Instead, it was aborted midway. Doomed to remain unfinished, readers and onlookers alike grew restless with frustration. Who wouldn't curse it as castrated, the moment this storybook was released? It rode the coattails of its predecessor's lingering popularity and immediately caused a sensation. compared to those refined and lofty tales of elderly noblemen and their beautiful concubines, filled with secretive displays of wealth and piles of power and possessions. The thrilling entanglement between a middle-class family's legitimate son and his young stepmother was far more suited to the tastes of the common folk. Its audience rapidly expanded from literati and poets to include ordinary townsfolk. The former could only rely on bundling with Red Duster's Night Flight 4 hype this time. It might truly stand on its own as a legend. The storyteller narrated how he interacted with this young lady from Jugyang. Despite being younger than Jugyang insisted on acting like an elder, sternly cooking him a bowl of plain kanji after his exhausting paperwork and forcing him to rest. Young master Yu's long-lost maternal love was finally fulfilled at this moment. Yet Jugyang bore no resemblance to his distant, cold, and strict mother, and compared to his dignified, well-bred fiancé, she carried the lively charm of an innocent maiden. He slept more soundly than ever before, and upon waking discovered that Xiao Niang had copied books for him half the night. As if guided by spirits, he endured his teacher's scolding to secretly preserve Xiao Niang's elegant handwriting, only to face his mother's reprimands and punishment upon returning home, which made him appreciate Zhu Qiong's kindness all the more. Li Shuangtian glared at his cold, unfeeling, and severely strict mother. His earlier praise of the storyteller, such masterful writing. Surely this is a once-in-a-generation genius at manipulating public opinion, now felt somewhat awkward. She cleared her throat twice. Our Fengjie possesses awe-inspiring dignity and noble bearing. What does this scribbler know about writing stories? Noticing my unchanged expression, which resembled the tense stillness before smashing through a tea-house roof with a spiked club straight to the earth's core, fearing collateral damage, she cautiously suggested, "Shall I dig out the mastermind behind this and give them a beating to vent your anger?" I found it somewhat amusing. She's already tipped me off. I tried to stop him, but it was no use. The man wouldn't budge an inch, speaking with righteous indignation. "What do you know about writing stories? You with your spiked club, how can you call it immersive without some exaggeration? Considering I've got beef with them and have been doing your grunt work, can't you cut me some slack?" Li Shuangtian's eyes lit up. "So it was you. Who was that person?" "Ding Xian. She was the noblewoman who had played along with me on my birthday, only to have her son's coveted position as compiler snatched away. Born into a military family, few knew she was a talented woman well-versed in literature and skilled with both brush and blade. That day I hadn't coordinated with her beforehand, yet she effortlessly provided supporting testimony, making our act so convincing it saved me considerable effort." Li Shuangtian flared up slightly. "Well, Wei Fengming, I thought you'd completely abandoned that whole family from the Chancellor's residence. I specially brought you here to let you enjoy their humiliation and vent your anger. Never imagined you'd been secretly scheming behind my back all along, and you didn't tell me. You even found another woman to collaborate with." After a moment's silence, I replied, "Got busy and forgot. I couldn't very well tell her she played no role in this step. Better to say nothing at all." Li Shuangtian was just habitually being a cheeky bastard. He'd be fine once the mischief passed. Yet these very words stirred waves within the Chancellor's residence. Rumors could kill a man, only those with extraordinary mental fortitude remained unaffected, and Jiang Rui clearly wasn't one of them. He had always prided himself on being upright and righteous, yet his fiery temper led him to tear up books and beat a storyteller right in the bustling marketplace. This stirred up a hornet's nest. Soon every storyteller in the capital joined forces. Their tongues proving no less sharp than those of imperial censors, they spun wild tales with vivid details, as if they'd been hiding under the Prime Minister's bed eavesdropping on pillow talk. Rumors need only one mouth to spread, but when they land on a person, not even 100 mouths could ever clear their name. The spy left at the Prime Minister's residence returned to report that these days the mansion had been seething with undercurrents and an oppressive atmosphere. The first to believe in these ghostly rumors was the old madam, who confined Wan Xintang in her own chambers in an attempt to control her. All day long, she made pointed remarks and humiliated her indirectly. Even if nothing had happened, her extreme measures would have made it seem true. A father and son falling out is only a matter of time. Not to mention Jiang Rui and Wan Xintang already had some ambiguous dealings. Li Shuangtian laughed. I'll have my people print multiple copies immediately and deliver them overnight to every prefecture. Rest assured, we'll ensure his name lives on forever, granting him eternal fame posthumously. I brewed tea for her, my wrist swirling swiftly. The Chancellor's residence will soon run short of funds, you'd best prepare early. As I spoke these words, the Chancellor's residence was being blockaded at its gates. A wealthy merchant had come to claim the property, deed in hand. Accompanied by fierce wandering swordsmen. Do you know where you're standing, daring to cause trouble here? Get lost. The wealthy merchant raised his head arrogantly. The deed is in my hand. This is my property now. It's you who should scram. I'm waiting to collect this house and register the ownership change at the magistrate's office. This is a mansion I bought with 60,000 taels of pure silver. Who do you think you are, trying to live here without the deed? Not even princes or nobles could get away with such nonsense. With the property deed in hand, he was no longer someone a mere gatekeeper could handle. After all, no one expected that the house where the entire family had lived for so many years actually lacked a property deed. Only Jiang Xuanqi knew that this house was originally mine. Seeing him suffer in his cramped official quarters before our marriage, I found countless excuses to settle him here. The property deed had always been in my possession. It wasn't part of my dowry, so Li Shuangtian didn't drive them all out that day. He was young then, still unable to distinguish sincerity from pretense, nor could he tell whether he delighted in me or in wealth and power. A myriad of complex emotions intertwined within him as he thought to be entangled in love like this for a lifetime. A noble man judges by deeds, not intentions. With wild ambitions of rising above others, he wrote me an IOU. I casually tossed that IOU into the brazier, unwilling to witness any moment where his pride might bend. Otherwise, by now, he might have ended up like Lu Huichen and Yarou Chong, Tang dynasty ministers who either lived in humble dwellings or stayed in roadside inns. Jiang Rui rushed out furiously. How could mother be so heartless? She's even selling the house. Even if she's separated from father, I still live there. Does she mean to drive me out onto the streets? I'll go confront her. The wealthy merchant scoffed. It won't matter who you go to. The Marquis of Guanxue is selling assets to raise military funds, praised by all. Whether you're her son, grandson, or even the Jade Emperor himself living there, she'll sell it regardless. Daring to buy this is my contribution to our soldiers. The Marquis of Guanxue is a woman of iron. How did she end up with a worthless brat like you? Fine bamboo sprouting rotten shoots. Jiang Rui could no longer step outside. Retreating into his residence and never showing his face again, after several rounds of negotiation, Jiang Xuanqi was willing to purchase the estate, but the wealthy merchant refused, raising the price on the spot, no matter the threats or inducements. He stubbornly insisted on 88,800 taels. You can't expect me to walk away empty-handed, can you? Let me tell you, a barefoot man fears no shoes. If I walk out this door today and anything happens to me, the wandering swordsman of the capital will hold the Prime Minister's residence accountable. Don't say I'm asking for the moon. Half this sum will go to hiring swordsmen for my protection. The crisp white banknotes reached my hands before Li Shuangtian had finished his cup of tea. That old fellow still had this much squeezed out of him. He couldn't have embezzled or taken bribes, could he? I shook my head. He's always been too proud for such things. All the Chancellor's expenses have been covered by me, so naturally he could produce this much, but it probably won't be long now before it begins. This mansion had already drained most of his family fortune. Jiang Xuanqi had never managed a household before and hadn't realized that maintaining a prime minister's residence also required enormous funds. How long could the savings he'd accumulated over these years possibly last? All it would take now was someone to give him a slight push. And he'd have no choice but to dip his hands, kept clean for so many years, into the murky dye vat. Li Shuangtian drained the last drop of tea from his cup, its chill piercing straight to his core. The governor of Dongtai Prefecture is my trusted confidant. In his 7 years of governance, he has achieved both political harmony and public support, long deserving promotion, yet my imperial brother has persistently kept him confined to local office. Since he's already opened the door to promoting Wan Shoujuan, transferring a prefectural governor back to the capital shouldn't be considered a significant matter for him. The 3-month deadline passed swiftly. On the day the army marched out, The emperor led all civil and military officials to the capital's outskirts to see me off. While the emperor inspected the troops, Jiang Xuanqi spoke softly to me. Sister Feng, I never imagined parting ways with you, must we? As husband and wife who pledged our lives together, come to this, if you're willing, my position as principal wife will always be reserved for you. When you return and lay down your armor, you'll still be my one and only wife. I gazed ahead at the hundreds of thousands of soldiers standing in perfect formation, their might overwhelming mountains and rivers. The war banners fluttered fiercely, embroidered solely with the character Wei, in the past, merely following behind my father. Witnessing such scenes couldn't suppress the heroism swelling in my chest. Now that times have changed, having truly tasted what it means to command vast armies, I've come to understand how power nourishes a person. With a single stamp of the marshal's seal, all the world's troops obey orders. With the Tiger Tally issued, none dare disobey its deployment commands. I am the Grand Marshal of all under heaven's armies. Yet he treats the position of Chief Counselor's principal wife as some rare treasure to dangle before me. If Chief Counselor's words were heard by the concubines in your household, they would surely be heartbroken. She refused to be a concubine, so you settled her outside. Now that you're without a wife, you still won't elevate her to principal status. Yuan Xintang had indeed considered it. But Jiang Xuanqi temporarily put her off with the excuse that managing household affairs during pregnancy would be too taxing. Now she spoke frankly. With Yuan's humble origins and tender age, how could she possibly serve as the mistress of the chancellor's household or the matriarch of the Jiang family? In her past life, Yuan Xintang's elevation to principal wife was due to her bearing several sons. She possessed an exceptionally auspicious appearance for bearing male heirs, benefiting the family's prosperity and earning the old madam's approval. After managing household affairs for years, with support from Jiang Rui and Jiang Rui's daughters-in-law, she swiftly transformed into a noblewoman capable of standing on her own. The Yuan family flourished under Jiang Xuanqi's patronage. The former perpetual academician Yuan owed his rise to his son-in-law's influence, attaining the third-rank purple robe official position. His brothers steadily climbed the ranks with smooth official careers, while his sisters, though married beneath their station, all wedded men holding important posts. When one daughter prospers an entire clan, the family naturally reciprocates with full support. Moreover, human nature is inherently perverse. Only what costs dearly becomes treasured. Only love tempered through suffering endures. Now that it comes effortlessly, I'm unwilling to invest any more effort. It suddenly dawned on me that Jiang Xuanqi was just an ordinary, conceited man at heart, not only stingy but also full of schemes. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. The emperor turned his head and glanced back. What are you two ministers discussing that's so amusing? He probed. After all, you've been married for many years. Such sudden severance inevitably leaves lingering affection that's only natural. When Marquis Guanxue returns victorious, we might yet grant you special favor. Jiang Xuanqi was overjoyed and immediately moved to kneel in gratitude, but I caught his elbow, making it impossible for his knee to bend further. Your servant knows his advancing years preclude thoughts of future marriage. Princess Huishu took pity on my solitary state and recently gifted me a male companion, none other than that famously beautiful actor from Shengjing. I fear this precludes any possibility of rekindling ties with Minister Wen. This was indeed true. Though that actor was also someone from the past, the only grandson of the late General Jing made a choice different from my father's over a decade ago. Unwilling to believe in the heartlessness of the imperial family, he ultimately couldn't bear the cruel truth and took his own life. When the old man died, his entire family was implicated. The women were enslaved in the Jiaofangxi, while the men were exiled 1,000 miles away to perform menial labor. With no male heirs left in the Jing family except a 7-year-old boy, I couldn't stand idly by under my father's request. After much maneuvering, I managed to save him, allowing him to stay with his sisters in the Jiaofangxi. Over the years, uncles and aunts secretly looked after them, preserving at least their last shred of dignity. The daughters of the Jing family were extraordinary in their own ways. Under the guise of opera performers, they secretly trained in martial arts. Hearing that war had broken out again, they offered their families secret bodyforging techniques and volunteered to serve under my command. Hoping to restore the Jing family's former glory, fearing I might refuse, they presented me with their exceptionally beautiful and renowned younger brother as a male concubine, hoping he could whisper some pillow talk in my ear. They were outstanding talents, so naturally I couldn't refuse. Now enlisted as my personal guards, when we return from this campaign, the Jing family will surely claim their share of military honors. It wasn't because of the pillow talk, cough. But now Prime Minister Wen has just taken in a delicate concubine who's pregnant and unable to serve him, leaving no one to manage household affairs. The thought of His Excellency lying alone tossing and turning at night, then having to oversee domestic matters while serving His Majesty by day, it truly makes me unable to suppress laughter. A few snickers also rose from the crowd. The Emperor found this utterly unacceptable. The Grand Chancellor of Letters was his personally appointed model scholar official, and such repeated disgraceful behavior also tarnished his own dignity. With frustration akin to wishing iron could turn to steel, he admonished, a Grand Chancellor of Letters, yet not even a competent secondary wife to manage affairs. If you cannot handle your household matters properly, we shall have the Empress bestow someone to manage them for you. If the Empress were to send someone who could tell whether they'd be assistants or spies, wouldn't he then live under constant surveillance every day? What secrets could he possibly keep? Jiang Xuanqi bowed deeply in refusal. How dare I trouble your Majesty? My daughter-in-law comes from a distinguished family and currently manages household affairs in her capacity. Contrary to what others might say, the Emperor felt relieved amidst his distress. My schadenfreude was evident, and Jiang Xuanqi once again dismissed me as an outsider. It seemed there was no possibility left between Jiang Xuanqi and me. He wished our enmity to deepen further, and so it unfolded exactly as he desired. Jiang Xuanqi's brows darkened like gathering storm clouds. Sister Feng seems determined to oppose me. I narrowed my eyes, utterly unfazed by his threats. My words cut sharper than a dagger, tearing through the last shred of pretense. Old thief, you and I have long been locked in a fight to the death. Last life it was me who died. Now it's his turn. Li Shuangtian escorted me 10 miles beyond the capital, stopping only when we reached the boundary marker. With me in the capital, elder sister need not worry. When you return victorious, I'll surely find you 8 or 10 stunning male consorts to keep you company. If you don't come back from this journey, I'll slaughter Jiang Xuanqi's entire family as sacrifice. I curled my lip. The Jiang family is lucky, they'll get to live a little longer. Li Shuangtian threw back his head and laughed heartily, then turned his horse around without so much as a backward glance. The campaign beyond the frontier lasted 2 years and 3 months. The Rongdi tribes excelled in brute strength, fielding fierce warriors and sturdy steeds nourished on raw meat and blood. I countered them with tactical formations and traps, relying on wit rather than force. Time and again I defeated larger armies with smaller ones, reclaiming several cities in succession. The army marched northwestward with unstoppable momentum. The new chieftain of the Rongdi tribes was no fool. He too understood military strategy and tactics. It was simply a matter of who could wield them more skillfully. Most memories from past lives no longer fit the circumstances of this present existence. After all, how could routed troops compare to a victorious army? Now, the initiative rests firmly in my hands. Before the Rongdi could even begin to enjoy the fertile lands and abundant treasures of the Central Plains, they were driven back to their familiar territories. Marshal, it has been 61 days without rain, the Rongdi people's provisions are exhausted, and the city is parched with drought. Just a single spark could set the entire city ablaze. Wen Qing reported the battle situation. Though the Rongdi had retreated to the grasslands, they had yet to surrender. Until they bowed their heads in submission, this war would not be over. These were harsh times on the grasslands. Though autumn had just begun, the cold was already unbearable, dry and biting, with winds that cut like knives. I've been stationed here for 9 full months, boiling them slowly like frogs in warm water. Now is the time to turn up the heat and finish them off. In the first half of the year, with grass growing and orioles flying, soldiers didn't fight but instead farmed. Reclaiming wasteland and diverting rivers, the crops they grew were traded for hides, cattle, and sheep. Since the war began, vegetables, fruits, and grains had become extremely precious commodities on the grasslands. A bag of grain could be exchanged for a sack of hides. while 2 catties of fresh produce could fetch a fat sheep. When the first autumn rain fell, everyone began preparing for battle. In the autumn of that previous life, it rained continuously for dozens of days. Followed by 2 full months of drought, autumn was supposed to be the season of harvest, but this abnormal weather disrupted everything, destroying the already scarce crops on the grasslands. That year, the Rongdi people, who had been slowly encroaching before, suddenly advanced their front lines like madmen, launching a full-scale invasion of the Central Plains. Only then did the imperial court feel the urgency of war. The calamity of the grasslands has turned into a man-made disaster for the Central Plains, yet now it has become my opportune moment. For 2 months now, I've had the Rongdi army surrounded. Word has it they've dug up even grass roots and seeds to eat, turning over every inch of the wilderness 3 times over, until even field mice are nearly extinct. Without provisions soon, they'll likely resort to cannibalism. Scouts report that supplies arrived today, inside my silver helmet. Tightly packed was the lambskin traded during summer, with a glossy purple wolf tail wrapped around my neck. Even as the frontier winds and sands blew, I felt no chill. I sniffed the air. Stewed lamb today. You said battle was imminent and ordered the troops to eat their fill before grappling with the Rongdi tribesmen. The kitchen slaughtered plenty of sheep today, prepared according to the Jing family's body-forging dietary regimen. With extra galangal and astragalus, grassland sheep are truly plump. The pot's barely begun simmering, yet you've already caught the scent. I rubbed my hands together. What's the point of just teasing me? Don't let them stew it in the kitchen either. Take it out to tempt those Rongdi barbarians. Today's northwest wind is perfect. Wanqing flashed a mischievous smile and clattered away noisily. As soon as I stepped out of the grand tent, I saw my invincible personal guards vigorously waving pinwheels. The white smoke that had merely been drifting northwest now shot toward the enemy city like arrows loosed from bows. A maiden about 13 or 14 bowed to me. Honored mother, this is Li Shuangqian's youngest daughter Jiao Ying, the apple of his eye born when he was 38. Delivered along with the provisions after I conquered 18 cities in succession. Her little face was flushed red from the cold. Slightly chapped, bearing no resemblance whatsoever to the pampered daughter of nobility one might expect, like a wild lamb on the grasslands. Even Li Shuangqian himself would likely hesitate to recognize her at first glance. You've neglected to apply Sister Jing Sui's mutton fat ointment again. Wait until she sees this, she'll cry about you rejecting her. And then you'll behave. Pepper Blossom rubbed her face against my palm, greedy for the warmth in a martial artist's hand. Don't tell her I told you this, but I secretly gave that mutton fat ointment to a Rongdi child. Her face was cracked and oozing pus. She just clutched the ointment and started gnawing on it, so I shared half my flatbread with her. I said happily, having compassion is a good thing. Talented individuals like you often lack empathy for the pitiful. But remember, don't be soft-hearted, and especially don't be foolishly kind. Jiao Ying nodded. So I followed her into the tunnel dug by the Rongdi people. Sister Jingsu is now leading people to block it. I lifted her up in my arms. She wasn't exactly small anymore, but in my hands she still felt like a little doll. Pepper Blossom wasn't a wild lamb, she was a young hawk specially bred to snatch up lambs. Go back today and think carefully. If we defeat the Rongdi people, how will you govern this land to ensure Han Chinese and Rongdi can coexist peacefully without infringing upon each other? Get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow we'll return to see Mother. The twilight hour approached. Just as the great winds began their furious dance, the Rongdi tribesmen, their eyes already reddened by the tormenting aroma of stewed lamb, finally received their long-delayed provisions. It wasn't much, but having something to eat was already fortunate. The soldiers who first greeted the provisions fiercely tore into the wind-dried raw beef, their eyes moist. He thought of his homelands, felt tense, of the mare's milk wine simmering on the stove, of returning through snowy nights when his mother would always hang a mutton-fat lamp on the flagpole by the tent entrance. The new chieftain led them southward to seize livable lands. On the day the young men departed, every yurt's entrance hung with a mutton-fat lamp. Like stars scattered across the grassland, just as now, those faint orange lights flickering at the horizon, was this hunger-induced hallucination. He rubbed his eyes, nothing had changed. That was a Kongming lantern flying into the sky, one after another. In clusters, why were the Central Plains people praying for blessings at this moment? Only when the oil fell upon the provisions and supplies, and thick yellow smoke billowed once more outside the city walls, carrying the stench of saltpeter. Did he realize that the beast of the Central Plains had shed its sheepskin disguise, baring its fangs to devour them whole? He wanted to shout, but poisonous smoke choked his mouth and nose. With the provisions ablaze before him, he could only think of saving himself and ran toward open ground. The fire raged for half the night until the secret tunnel was destroyed, and finally, the Rongdi invaders breached the city gates. Suddenly, torrential rain poured from the heavens. The disciplined army marched forward unimpeded. The emaciated soldiers of the Central Plains finally fought their way back into the Rongdi people's city after losing vast territories. The banner of Marquis Guanxue, Wei Fengming, was planted atop the Rongdi city walls. This was a feat even my father had never achieved. The young Rongdi chieftain was captured in despair by Jing He, the eldest daughter of the Jing family, in an earthen cave at the base of the city wall. As heavy rain washed the dirt from his face, he gazed despairingly at the untimely rain and cried, "Even heaven refuses to aid me." Jing He seized him by the nape and deftly dislocated his limbs. "It's not that heaven won't help, it's that men will destroy you." Our marshal held firm for 2 months, ordering the court astrologer to observe the stars daily. "Did you think we were just herding sheep?" The opponent finally gave up struggling. Jing He tied the captive onto the horse's back. Instead of riding, he pulled the prized steed along as he ran wildly, bouncing joyfully toward the commander's tent. "Aunt Feng, which is worth more dead or alive? Capturing the leader earns the highest merit. This old lady is finally going to make the Jing family rise." Woohoo tilde. From afar in the commander's tent came Wen Qing's deep-bellied roar, channeled from his dantian. "Who the hell do you think you're calling old woman, you brat?" 2 years away from the capital had transformed it into an entirely different world. Li Shuangtian rode out to meet me at the boundary marker with an imperial edict in hand: promote Marquis Guanxue to Duke of Qian, bestow upon him the title of Princess Huyang, and grant him command of the 3 armies Marshal Seal and the Tiger Tally. Left General Jing He, having meritoriously captured the rebel king, is elevated to Count Ningen and appointed Minister of War. Right General Jing Sui is promoted to Grand General and appointed Vice Minister of War. Guard General Jing Mai is appointed Commander of the Palace Guard, overseeing the Marshal's office. Deputy General Zhu Wanqing is conferred the title of Cloud-ranking General and Lady of Hengtai County. At this moment, the capital's outskirts were filled with their own people, so much so that not a single person dismounted. How could the emperor be so generous? This isn't like his usual behavior. Li Shuangtian rode alongside me on horseback, holding Jiaoying in her arms. After this campaign, he's tasted the sweetness of pacifying the realm through military might for the first time. Now he's dreaming of becoming the greatest emperor throughout history. Of course he'd want to win over rising nobles. A flicker of disgust flashed through her eyes. The emperor merely sits upon his lofty throne, while warriors charge into battle for him. No matter how fierce the flames of war rage 1,000 miles away, they reach his presence only as words on paper. His eyes see only victories. How could trivial matters weigh on his mind, and how could he comprehend the hardships of war, or the countless post-war decisions requiring his command? Far from worrying about military affairs, he seldom even attends court discussions. Instead, he has taken several new concubines, indulging ever more deeply in pleasures of the flesh. Were it not for her holding firm in the capital, who knows how many layers of corruption would have siphoned off the provisions and military funds sent to the frontier? How could such a person be worthy of dreaming of becoming a mighty ruler relying on the merits of his subjects? She scoffed disdainfully. Just wait and see the show. Li Shuangtian and I played off each other perfectly. One concealed their gender when reporting merits, leading the emperor to assume the Jing family had 3 brothers, thus generously promoting them during the commendation. The other, fearing the emperor might regret his decision upon seeing them, rushed ahead with the imperial decree under the pretext of allowing the soldiers to enter the capital adorned with their honors. Only then would their return be truly glorious. Let's solidify our military achievements first. I dare not imagine how colorful the emperor's expression will be when he sees his Minister of War, Vice Minister of War, and palace commandant all being women. On the journey back to the capital spanning dozens of miles, Li Shuangtian recounted the events of the past 2 years in the capital. While anecdotes and amusing tales had already been relayed to me via letters, she now shared those stories too sensitive to be put into writing. Jiang Xuanqi was no longer the upright and principled scholar official of old. Wan Xintang had borne him twin sons, proudly declaring herself the great benefactor of the Jiang family. She monopolized household authority fiercely, allowing no one else even a sliver of influence. Her daily outings were conducted with extravagant pomp, spending money like water, compounded by that utterly unambitious family of hers, whom she had fattened with funds funneled from the ministerial residence. Distant relatives all came knocking to seek favors. She dismissed them all with generous silver gifts, even arranging jobs for them in the ministerial residence. Eager to have every member of her maternal family witness her noble prestige, the passion between them gradually faded, no longer burning with the intensity of their former love. At first, the emperor faced the horrors of war with restless anxiety, until victory reports arrived one after another, making him believe the northern barbarians were no match at all. His emotions swung between tension and relief until his entire being swelled with pride. The first 20 years of his reign could only be called mediocre, but now he was showing early signs of becoming a tyrant. Jiang Xuanqi's lust for wealth reached unprecedented heights. As long as he could keep the emperor pleased, he could do whatever he pleased. These past 2 years, he sold official posts, seized land, and amassed fortunes, completely abandoning his former ways to become an out-and-out corrupt official, though he never directly harmed the common people. Those beneath him naturally oppressed those even lower to curry his favor. Now that I've used his hand to install my own people in all key positions, even if heaven and earth were overturned someday, the court administration wouldn't collapse. The faction has been formed. Whenever common people suffer harm, I shall personally go to console them and provide compensation. Once reviled as a demon king who brought chaos to the world, she has now become a living bodhisattva of compassion in the mouths of the people. Whenever corrupt officials commit atrocities, she's there to mend the damage. It's lamentable that as a princess, she can only assist from below but cannot govern from above. The hearts of the people are now won. Now that I've returned, military power rests securely in my grasp. All that remains is lacking a just cause for war. The emperor was indeed displeased, yet in the moment he knew not how to vent his anger. That night, reports came from both palace and court informants. The favored consort Chen spoke softly, saying the daughters of the Jing family had no one to rely on. Let them establish their own households and remain unmarried, then there would be no worry of factionalism. Attendants before the hall consoled, saying if those holding great power and high positions now were a group of men, the situation would likely be far more troublesome, precisely because they were women. They were easier to control, more docile. The emperor was flattered into complacency by both court officials and palace concubines. As a ruler of extraordinary talent and bold vision, why should he care so much about a few women? The previous dynasty also had female officials. It was merely following old customs. What threat could they possibly pose? At that time, Li Shuangtian and I were drinking and enjoying ourselves. Now, everything was ready except for the east wind, the final catalyst. The most fitting pretext for rebellion was none other than cleansing the court of evil advisors. No one is more suited to stand by the ruler's side than Jiang Xuanqi, who says my taste in men is poor. Where else could I find a more perfect stepping stone, after letting them roam free these past 2 years? It's about time I stretch my limbs and create favorable winds. The next day, a group of merchants holding promissory notes arrived at the chancellor's residence demanding repayment. Cornering Jiang Rui, who had just returned from court through the side gate right then and there, they dared not bring the matter before Jiang Xuanqi, but toward the disfavored eldest son of the prime minister's household. They needn't be so polite. The discord between Prime Minister Wen and his eldest son had long been an open secret, though no one had dared to voice it openly for fear of losing face. These past 2 years, Jiang Xuanqi had grown increasingly sensitive and brooding due to the sensational serialization of his novels. Originally, the eldest son was close in age to his beloved concubine. Who could fathom how muddled his thinking had been, believing that once Jiang Rui married, He could safely entrust Ruan Xintang to his care with extra attention. That serialized storybook continues to release monthly installments, compiling countless details depicting the push and pull of mutual affection between the legitimate heir and his stepmother. He who has unmistakably become the male lead of these tales, while his father, long since faded like yesterday's flowers, has been cast aside and forgotten. From time to time, readers still eagerly anticipate the scholarfather's absence in the story, hoping to create space for the heir and stepmother to grow closer, yearning for their eventual happy union. His lost count of how many copies he's torn apart. Yet he can't resist buying them again, meticulously combing through the text and comparing it with reality, searching for traces of truth in what's written. The book describes how Zhu Qiao teased Hiyu beneath the dining table with her delicate feet, while Hiyu maintained a calm exterior but secretly removed her embroidered shoe and took away her silk stocking. Flirting so daringly right under her proper husband's nose stirred some rather peculiar interests among certain readers. As for the proper husband himself, his eyes turned red with rage after witnessing this. From then on, all table legs in the ministerial residence were replaced with solid square posts. No matter how hard one knocked their feet, they couldn't reach across anymore. He often neurotically made Ruan Xintang lift her skirt hem to check if her silk stockings showed any signs of tampering. They kept Jiang Rui under strict surveillance, requiring him to come and go together daily and restricting his movements within the Chancellor's residence, never allowing him to set foot in the inner quarters. If official duties lasted more than 3 days, Jiang Rui would be driven out of the residence and forbidden from returning home. Left with no choice, Jiang Rui had to lodge with colleagues or his in-laws, but frequent visits would inevitably become bothersome, especially since his official rank hadn't changed in 2 years. While Chancellor Wen had promoted countless others, anyone could see he had fallen out of his father's favor. Thus, with nowhere else to go, Jiang Rui even rented a room long-term at an inn, in the capital, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. His meager salary would take 3 years just to save enough for a modest alleyway courtyard. When the father thrives while the son cannot stand on his own, Jiang Xuanqi, as the Minister of Culture, remains in a position of blazing prosperity, and Jiang Rui is thus unable to establish his own household or break away from the family. Their twisted, suspicion-filled triangular relationship remains confined within the same mansion, left to ferment rumors. Ruan Xintang couldn't bear Jiang Xuanqi's baseless suspicions either, yet she also felt guilty. After all, what maiden hasn't felt her heart flutter for a handsome young gentleman? Even though Jiang Xuanqi was exceptionally outstanding back then, Jiang Rui was equally the dream lover of many young ladies. Living so close to him, how could she possibly have harbored no thoughts at all? She often relied on her undisclosed connections and Jiang Xuanqi's instructions to boldly converse and laugh with Jiang Rui. Naturally, some found it inappropriate. Her legitimate sister, after witnessing her toasting and composing poetry with Jiang Rui at the poetry gathering and chatting by the lake, scolded her as shameless, only to be punished by Jiang Rui and the host's daughter. Forced to apologize with wine, they reprimanded her sister for spreading rumors, insisting that their pure and innocent relationship had been tainted by her filthy imagination. She then took this remark as gospel, arrogantly considering herself his elder and growing even bolder in her interactions without regard for propriety. This was tacitly permitted by Jiang Xuanqi. What's wrong with bonding with one's future stepson to gain his acceptance? Thus in that storybook, half of the 10 ambiguous encounters between Zhu Qiong, who was placed under the old madam's guidance before being formally taken as a concubine, and Hiyu were based on real events. When Ruan Xintang first read the book, her heart raced with fear that her past might be exposed, yet the writer's tender, poignant prose emboldened her to purchase each new installment monthly, especially now that we're both under Jiang Xuanqi's suspicion. Every time I see Jiang Rui, I feel a shared empathy as fellow sufferers cast adrift, along with an indescribable sense of loss. Initially, Jiang Rui was indeed stirred by springtime desires, but ever since I left the ministerial residence, he suddenly realized the irreconcilable conflicts of interest between him and Ruan Xintang, and everything changed. In the past, even when my maternal relatives declined, there was still a proper ducal mansion serving as my mother's family. He himself was the sole legitimate eldest son of the Prime Minister's household. Who else could his father support if not him? Yet after I left, Wan Xintang could be legitimized at any moment, and she even gave birth to 2 sons in one go. What special status did this legitimate eldest son, who lacked maternal family support, still possess? Moreover, because of her, he couldn't even return home and had to endure his father's intense control and paranoia. Forget about affection, his guts were twisted with regret. Had he told his mother back then, they could have nipped this disaster in the bud. How could things have come to this? Jiang Rui was consumed by remorse, not mentioning a word about his own past wicked thoughts. If he'd truly been an upright man, he would never have allowed Wan Xintang to cross the boundaries between stepmother and legitimate son. Ultimately, he also enjoyed the feeling of his father's beautiful concubine being infatuated with him. It gave him a sense of accomplishment. Proving his charm was no less than that of his father, the esteemed Minister of Letters. Now, even lowly merchants dared to trample over him, pushing his humiliation to its peak. But before Jiang Rui could erupt in anger, their words drenched him like a bucket of icy water, chilling him to the bone. Father, disaster looms. Ever since the rift had formed between father and son, he rarely sought out Jiang Xuanqi on his own. The man now viewed him with disdain, constantly nitpicking his faults. Approaching him would only invite scolding. This time he couldn't care less about propriety. Rushing headlong into Jiang Xuanqi's study, Jiang Xuanqi frowned. Such improper behavior. Where have all the manners your tutor taught you gone? You might as well resign from your post early and enjoy some leisure, lest you disgrace me further. In the past, Jiang Rui would have seethed with resentment and wild thoughts, but now his mind was entirely consumed by the merchant's talk of debts. How much silver remains in our household accounts, do you know? Jiang Xuanqi sneered coldly. What? Is this family head not yet old enough for you to start coveting the family fortune? Get out. The Prime Minister's residence isn't yours to command. Jiang Rui's half-chilled heart turned completely cold. Indeed, it wasn't his place to decide. Why should he bother himself with such concerns? His face darkened as he snorted. Since that's the case, father may decide for himself. After all, it's Madame Wan's relatives who owe the debt. And the promissory note bears the seal of the Prime Minister's residence, not mine. Since father has always suspected improper relations between Madame Wan and myself, I ought naturally to avoid any appearance of impropriety. A surge of vengeful satisfaction rose within him. But I must remind you, father, the debt is no small sum. At a glance, I saw promissory notes exceeding 100,000, and I dared not look further. You'd better verify it yourself. Jiang Xuanqi dismissed it casually. A mere 100,000 taels. What's the big deal? Just have the accountant pay it and be done with it. Such trivial matters shouldn't trouble me. No wonder I've grown a few white hairs lately. Jiang Rui stiffened all over. While he didn't know the exact state of the family accounts, he had a general understanding of their financial situation. Those 88,000 taels of silver had essentially drained most of Jiang Xuanqi's personal fortune. Since Wan Xintang entered the household, she'd been squandering money like dirt. Utterly clueless about managing profitable ventures, his father, always aloof and proud, had recently begun frequently promoting officials, though admittedly, those promoted were indeed capable individuals. It felt peculiar, yet no one could find fault with it. But now that father doesn't even bat an eye at hundreds of thousands of taels of silver, it proves he possesses at least 100 times more than that. Besides selling official positions, what else could generate such immense income? It made him even more disheartened. Jiang Xuanqi would rather sell so many official posts than promote his own flesh and blood. Here he remained, still merely a fourth-rank official, while colleagues climbed steadily upward, even political adversaries advanced further. Only he lingered in place, waiting for his high-ranking father to let crumbs fall through his fingers. Looking back on his official career, every step forward required constant efforts to please his father, though seemingly racing ahead alone, achieving fourth-rank status at a young age, compared to those with genuine talent and learning. He hadn't truly surpassed them by much. For a moment, he felt there was no place left for him in this vast world. The instinct of a fledgling leaving its nest made him unconsciously seek his mother's embrace. I watched Jiang Rui, his face filled with confusion as he poured out his heart to me. and simply listened quietly. When he finished speaking, not a trace of change appeared on my face. Hasn't he realized there's no money left in the accounts? Jiang Rui was bewildered. Have you ever heard this nursery rhyme? When business comes knocking, first ask the name. Hearing Jiangwan brings smiles aplenty. The visitor laughs. The god of wealth arrives. With a grand gesture leaves an IOU, while Haitang digs into her own purse. They were talking about the Wan family. Nowadays they didn't even need to go begging door to door anymore. All they had to do was prove they were somehow related to Wan Xintang. And shops all over the capital would gladly let them buy on credit. When this news reached the Jiang family, they weren't happy about it. After all, it was the Prime Minister's money being spent. Why should the maternal aunt's family get to spend freely while the Jiangs, the main family, couldn't? So they started buying on credit too. At the end of the year, they could just take their IOUs to the Prime Minister's residence and collect the silver. Even if Jiang Xuanqi sold every government office position he could, he wouldn't be able to keep up with such extravagance. Now they've discovered a secret: the Chancellor's office has no money left in its accounts. That's why they've panicked, rushing to collect debts even before year-end. Of course, it was I who leaked the news. In the first year, Jiang Xuanqi sold many official positions at high prices, so both families still exercised some restraint, making debt collection at year-end smooth and effortless. But now the room for maneuvering is nearly saturated.
The minister requests your presence in his study for a word. I had intended to go anyway, just as he sent for me. There were only Jiang Xuanqi and me in the study. Compared to this period in his previous life, he had aged considerably, no longer bothering to maintain his appearance to match his young mistress, nor carrying the spirited vigor he once had in court. He had grown somewhat dull and weary. Without a common enemy to unite against, excessive intimacy instead led to a loss of novelty. Without life and death trials to endure, their affection came too easily, too fragile to withstand the test of time. He and Wan Xintang became an ordinary man and his concubine. It was only because of their past affection and their 2 children that there remained some semblance of sentiment between them. For the sake of prosperous descendants, even after learning of Wan Xintang's grave mistake, he would still share her bed. Baizhu was arranged into the household by you. Sister Feng, if seeing me suffer brings you some comfort, I don't mind letting her stay, but I don't understand. I've never felt I wronged you in my first 30 years of life. I only sought companionship elsewhere when life grew dull. Why do you hate me so? His voice trembled slightly. What I said 2 years ago was true. I truly never considered divorcing you. Such confessions and tearful tones might have moved me had they come from Jingwei. Coming from him, they only made me nauseous. Don't trust a man's tears, nor be moved by his pretentious displays. Look at him. Just because things didn't go according to his scheme and his trap wasn't sprung, he acts so bewildered and puts on such an aggrieved air. As long as the outcome doesn't materialize, he can convince even himself of his innocence and uphold it as gospel truth. But having taken one wrong step, I would never have another chance to turn things around. The excruciating pain from my past life, I endured it bitterly for 5 full years. I've asked myself countless times, what exactly did I do wrong to make him hate me so much? Did I ever wrong him? Do my 30 years not count as 30 years? So much so that, relying on our decades of marriage and deep affection, he dared to scheme against me so brazenly, boldly pulling out a knife from the bed we had just shared warmth in and plunging it straight into my heart. I want an answer until my dying breath, even if it's just to know the reason. Let me die an enlightened ghost. It was his silence that drove me mad. Half mad and half lucid, I suddenly understood. He must have harbored malice from the very beginning, to have drawn a sharp knife from our tender bed and traced it over my chest countless times while I slept. Only then can it be guaranteed. A single strike, a certain kill. He knows best how innocent the first how blameless, so he can't provide a reason, yet his wanton harm must have a cause, so he meticulously weaves accusations against me, turning me into public enemy, making me question myself again and again. Did I do wrong? After countless reflections, I remain faultless, so I died suddenly in this silent night. I stepped forward and slapped him twice in fury. Then let me ask you, over 30 years ago, when you rode past me on horseback during the parade and threw that Chonglin flower into my arms, was it love at first sight as you claimed, or had you planned it all along? Those 3 years of relentless pursuit through carrier pigeons, were you chasing after me, a woman past 20 whom people jokingly called a tigress, or were you after the dwindling power of my nearly extinct noble house and military influence? You kept a mistress for 2 years and colluded with everyone to hide it from me, letting others praise our eternal love and marital bliss. Were you afraid I'd be heartbroken and so crafted this illusion for me? Or were you waiting until 2 years later when I'd discover the betrayal and deceit from everyone, unable to control my emotions, so you could pin the blame on me? And today, when you asked why you wouldn't divorce me, was it out of responsibility, or was it fear of the oath you once swore, unwilling to be the heartless one, so you stood by while others drove me to my death? You don't even want to bear the slightest bit of guilt towards me, you're incapable of being a gentleman. And don't even dare to be an outright scoundrel, Jiang Xuanxi, you deserve to die 10,000 deaths. Jiang Xuanxi's face rapidly swelled until even his eye slits narrowed to nothing. I simply didn't want to see his expression and gaze after his defenses crumbled, so I let him remain silent, denying him any opportunity to wound me. Who says silence is the privilege of those in power? Who says it can't be the unspoken words of a prisoner with a gagged mouth? It was clear Jiang Xuanxi truly cared about me, exposing his hypocritical facade. Time and again he submitted memorials declaring when the hen announces the dawn, it signals the downfall of the household. He even presented confessions from the Rongdi tribesmen as evidence that I was compiling military texts to disseminate secret knowledge, thereby monopolizing military power, act sufficient to destabilize the imperial court. He went so far as to dig up correspondence between my father and me, extracting phrases out of context and twisting their meanings maliciously to prove I harbored resentment against the emperor because of my father. To make matters worse, the emperor himself had a guilty conscience in this matter and forcibly demanded I surrender my military tally and commander's seal before the entire court. I explained that no military manual existed, so the emperor ordered me to return home and compile one, forbidding me to leave until it was completed. I was placed under house arrest, having tasted the sweetness of wielding imperial power for his own ends. How could Jiang Xuanxi possibly stop now? Gradually testing the waters, he persuaded the emperor to condemn me for violating womanly virtues, sentencing Jing Wei to death while awarding me a chastity arch. This monument would list my offenses: divorcing my husband, keeping male companions, mingling with actors, and appearing in public, all to serve as both warning and mockery. The 3 sisters of the Jing family exchanged all their military merits for their younger brother's life, voluntarily resigned from their official posts, and chose to remain as loyal subjects alone. The massive chastity archway stood towering before the plaque of Duke Qian's residence. Inside the mansion, I listened as Matron Zhu reported the recent tumultuous changes occurring outside. Whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad, in some ways. Jiang Xuanxi and Wan Xintang were actually cut from the same cloth, both using ostensibly simple motives as pretexts for their endless demands. The trouble lies in insatiable greed. Most officials at court were impeaching him. Several articles detailing Jiang Xuanxi's exploitation of commoners for personal gain were interspersed within the latest installment of He Yu Jiuqiang's storybooks, spreading far and wide. Ding Xian wrote storybooks merely as a pastime. Her true expertise lay in composing essays, sharp-tongued yet accessible to all. Those who can read storybooks can understand this proclamation. Public resentment boiled over instantly. That night, a phoenix soared through the ink-black night sky, its body radiating golden light, dazzling and lofty. I held the strings in my residence until the kite, painted with gold lacquer and dipped in luminous powder, finally took flight, lifted by the wind. My hairpin helps me don my armor, while wolf-tail banners whip wildly in the wind. My lady, the east wind rises. I rest my hand on the weapon rack. The dozens of Jin wolf-tooth mace feels light as chopsticks when tossed in my palm. A fair wind lends me strength, bearing me to azure clouds. In an instant, an auspicious azure cloud drifted from the direction of Princess Huaishu's residence. Brandishing my wolf-toothed mace, I strode boldly in all directions, stepping out of the estate gates. My first swing shattered the chastity archway at the entrance. Marble fragments exploded outward as if war drums were shaking the earth. Before me stood the 3 Jing sisters, awaiting orders with their personal guard. The treacherous prime minister manipulates power, deceives the emperor, and preys upon the people. By princess's command, on this journey, to serve the king, and rid the court of evil ministers, as everyone knows. The crux of ridding the court of evil ministers lies with the king himself. With deliberate negligence allowing his escape, Jiang Xuanxi, dressed in eunuch's robes, crawled through dog holes all the way back to the prime minister's residence, originally planning to pack his belongings and flee the capital overnight. No sooner had he entered the mansion and changed into casual clothes, intending to pack his bags and flee, Then Baizhu burst in. He had initially planned to dispatch her first with a blade. Baizhu belonged to me, and the only reason she'd been kept alive this long was because the Prime Minister's residence still needed her dowry management. Yet Baizhu didn't even glance at him. Grabbing his arm, she yanked him outside, completely exposing her back without a shred of defense, shouting, "My lord, you've finally returned. That shameless little harlot has taken a lover." I sensed something amiss earlier. Today I pretended to leave with the old madam for temple offerings, and she couldn't wait the moment we were barely out of sight. I waited anxiously for your return till my hair nearly turned white. They've already called truce several times by now, only to start their commotion again, drywood meeting fierce flames, piled together till the whole house nearly shakes apart. Jiang Xuanqi felt blood rushing to his head. Suppressing the white blade hidden in his sleeve for the moment, he decided to first catch them in the act and send them both to their doom. As he approached Wan Xintang's courtyard, he could hear the voices inside utterly unashamed, making no effort to conceal their affair. "Between me and that old man you married, who's better?" The familiar voice that had once been so sweetly coy in his presence now teased. "How is that even a question? The first few years were tolerable. But now he's worse than ever. The first wife said I'd never tasted the vigor of a young man. Well, now that I have, even those earlier years pale in comparison to you. He's starting to smell. You know, they say you've been carrying on with the young master. Today I saw those twins. Why do they seem so familiar? Tell me the truth." "Stop it, Tilda R." Jiang Xuanqi kicked the door open and lunged at the entangled couple with a gleaming white blade in hand. The man reacted quicker, wrapping Wan Xintang in a blanket to dodge, making their entanglement all the more conspicuous. The man happened to be a recent advisor he'd recruited, who often lingered around the manor's opera troupe. His dashing young male roles had stirred many a maiden's heart. Who would have thought he'd end up entangled with Wan Xintang and even dared use him as comparison? What outrageous humiliation. Pity his skills were only good for sneak attacks. In a proper confrontation, he'd be utterly outmatched. The advisor kicked him hard in the stomach, doubling him over in pain like a shrimp. "Didn't Chancellor Wen always say I shouldn't refuse compensation? Then I'll gladly accept this beautiful concubine of yours." He rolled up a nearby bundle of clothes, wrapped Wan Xintang in them, and leapt out the window. Madam Bai slapped her thigh in frustration. "Aya, those shameless lovers planned to elope today all along. They even packed gold and valuables, all with my money." Jiang Xuanqi staggered to his feet, brandishing the white blade as he lunged at her again. "You wretched woman, go die too." Baizhu instantly raised her leg and kicked. The blade embedded itself into the wooden pillar. In a flash, she had Jiang Xuanqi trussed up tightly with a sweat-soaked cloth. "I'm no delicate young miss. I've got strength and tricks aplenty. Before this old lady was married, I was the famous butcher beauty. I could pin down pigs weighing 200 or 300 jin without breaking a sweat. With your measly frame, who do you think you can take down?" She hoisted Jiang Xuanqi over her shoulder as if carrying half a slaughtered pig, calling out for someone to summon the imperial guards while walking. "My lady wants to purge the court of evil ministers. She'll handle the emperor. I'll catch the ministers. That should count as a great merit. Who knows? This widow Bai might even get herself a general's title. Heh, this deal is too damn good." By dawn, the world had changed. The poor emperor, held captive by treacherous ministers for so long, was finally rescued by Princess Huishu. The emperor issued an edict of self-blame, admitting his incompetence and willingly abdicating in favor of Princess Huishu, whose virtuous reputation was widely known, deeming himself unworthy of even enjoying retirement as Taishang Huang. He demoted himself to Prince of Lingnan. In the Taiqing Hall, the emperor lay gagged with white cloth and bound with hemp ropes. Whimpering incessantly, draft composed by Ding Xian, dictated by me, transcribed and sealed by Li Shuangtian. Li Shuangtian rubbed his hands together, somewhat embarrassed. "Is it really okay to praise me like this?" Ding Xian rolled her eyes at the future emperor. "This is meant to be read aloud to the people. Not for your eyes. How else will they be convinced if we don't lavish praise? You should have been a court historian instead. You write so well. How wild will future histories become?" Ding Xian was currently establishing an institution to manage public sentiment, just as I'm about to establish a military academy, recruiting talents from across the land to study the art of war. Li Shuangtian brushed off the freshly written imperial decree and turned to look at the emperor, who was writhing like a worm. "Imperial brother, do you know why I rebelled against you? I knew that being nominated as heir didn't guarantee I'd become emperor, so I was prepared to accept failure. But you're truly both foolish and wicked. How could someone like you possibly be worthy of standing above me? Just as Her Majesty chose for me the title Huishu, praising my wisdom and emphasizing my uniqueness. Yet when the imperial decree was finally issued, it became Hui Shu, meaning kind and virtuous. Instead, that day, it was you who transcribed the decree. Despite having Father Emperor's draft, you still managed to copy it wrong. Excusing yourself as careless, truly deserving punishment, Father Emperor raised the matter seriously but dealt with it lightly. I remember it well. Now, I shall punish you by making you yield the throne to me. You may voice objections and opposition, but your objections shall not be considered, and your opposition is invalid. What remained for her was endless silence. As for the occasional pig-like grunts mixed in, they were simply disregarded. Li Shuangtian ascended the throne. The empress took power, yet for the common people, there wasn't much significant change. Not even watching Jiang Xuanqi being paraded through the streets and pelted with rotten eggs had been this thrilling. After all, real oppression had occurred here, though Li Shuangtian had intervened to mitigate the consequences. Grudges last a lifetime. One shouldn't forget who caused the suffering just because rescue came. That day, the escorting officers continuously scattered slips of paper, small square sheets bearing a few lines of printed text. Jiang Xuanqi strained to read them, but shackles bound him, and his vision was further obscured by the stench of egg residue and fluttering paper scraps, until a child who had just begun their education read aloud the small characters inscribed upon it. Today and forevermore, two hearts shall know each other without betrayal, in years and moons to come. Whoever breaks this vow shall have their career severed. What does this mean? Beside them, an elder who knew this story sighed and began recounting events from over 30 years ago. After witnessing Jiang Xuanqi's tragic fate, many officials dismissed their concubines and devoted themselves wholeheartedly to their original wives. Monogamy suddenly became all the rage among officials and commoners alike. After all, who hasn't sworn solemn oaths in their youth? Jiang Xuanqi was doomed to go down in infamy. Possessing nothing of value and behaving like a madman, he was reduced to begging until he encountered Wan Xintang by the riverside, now a lowly washerwoman scrubbing clothes. Wan Xintang was entangled by a mad beggar, and while struggling desperately to break free, Jiang Xuanqi fell into the river. The weather was bitterly cold, and the icy water pierced to the bone. Jiang Xuanqi didn't even have time to surface before drowning at the river's bottom. In his final moments, his mind still wove dreams of prison fantasies. He was the male lead in the story, and Wan Xintang the heroine. As for me, the first principal of a military academy in history, a prince equal in rank to the emperor, co-ruling with Emperor Li Shuangtian, overseeing the nation's military affairs after death, I was buried alongside him in the imperial mausoleum. In future historical records, Wei Fengming of the Wei clan was honored with a place in the imperial annals. In the 10th year of Zhao Ying's reign, the rivers ran clear and the seas were calm, an era of peace and prosperity, with secure borders and trade routes spanning the world. By the 20th year, Zhao Ying examined my achievements and petitioned heaven to posthumously confer upon me the title of Martial Emperor, END.